Chapter 39. 3 days later, List returned to the Coral Islands Flower Town. Tulip Castle's night squad escorted him back to the Flower Town. In addition to List and Marcus, there were also 2 destitute aristocrats. They were all descendants of aristocrats, yet they had not inherited the title of nobility and could only be called knight. They were friends introduced by Gort. Tempted by the double salary, they came to the Flower Town to serve as an official. List, welcome back. You have only been gone for a little more than a week, yet I have already begun to miss you. Gort greeted the town's lord with a slightly exaggerated tone. His enthusiasm was exaggerated but thoughtful. And Marcus, loyal knight of Baron. Seeing that you are neatly dressed, I know that everything went smoothly. Look who these 2 are, Isaiah and Blair, my old friends. I am very happy to see that you have come together with Baron. Obviously, you have chosen the Flower Town. Next, the small castle prepared to hold a banquet for the night squad who were escorting List and his party. Before the banquet began, List, regardless of the dust, quickly carried the jade box containing the alfalfa sprite worm and arrived at the completed stud farm in front of the castle. The ground was already lush green. The alfalfa sprouted very quickly. Summer was approaching, and the temperature would promote their growth. Little fellow, come out. The plump alfalfa sprite worm, with purple patterns on its body, was very beautiful. Compared to the lazy tulip worm, it was very spirited. It opened its mouth and spat out the cordyceps. As a result, in the middle of the stud farm, the alfalfa sprouted and grew rapidly. Compared to ordinary alfalfa, the cordyceps were bigger and stronger, and they bloomed purple flowers. Don't forget to install guardrails around to prevent the horses from destroying the growth of the cordyceps. List ordered his valet, Thomas. The castle was directly responsible for elven-related matters, so there was no need for the town's officials or serfs to take care of them. Master, please rest assured, I will start building the guardrails. When List returned to the castle, the butler, old Carter, welcomed him. Master, the banquet is ready, you can take your seat. Then let's begin. Compared to the banquets List had eaten a few years ago, the Flower Town Castle's banquets were like heaven and earth. However, he preferred the current atmosphere, because he was the most distinguished person among the people present. First of all, I would like to thank Lord Loudon and the night squad for escorting me all the way. First, I would like to thank Lord Loudon and the night town. After downing a glass of beer, the servant immediately refilled it. List then raised a second glass. I wish Isaiah and Blair a happy life in Flower Town. Thank you, Sir Baron, for your blessings. I hope to contribute to the development of Flower Town. Finally, I would like to pay my respects to my teacher, Gort. While I was away, he managed everything for me. That is what I should do, List. As long as there is good wine to drink every day, I am willing to get drunk in the Flower Town. Gort laughed heartily. Manage the Flower Town when you are sober, and drink when you eat. List said. Of course, work and good wine are not neglected at the same time. The atmosphere was harmonious as the lunch was enjoyed. After seeing off the night squad, List returned to the castle for a lunch break. Lying on his bed, he concentrated a little and the familiar smoke mission appeared. The serpentines finally changed, mission completed. Reward, 3 wild corn. In a flash, the smoke changed and a new mission was issued. Mission, as the Lord, it is your duty to take care of the sprites. Have you forgotten about the wheat sprite worm? Its ability can produce more food for the territory. Please help the wheat sprite worm settle down its worm stalk. Reward, information on the invisible dragon. Information on the invisible dragon? What kind of reward is this? A bold idea suddenly emerged in List's mind. Could it be that the smoke mission is going to reward me with a dragon? That shouldn't be the case, this is a bit too satisfying. A dragon. It is an existence that can suppress the destiny of a state. However, what does the invisible dragon mean? Invisible? A shapeless dragon? According to the memories of his predecessor, there were three major types of dragons. The first type was the gem dragon. The Grand Duchy of Sapphire's sapphire dragon was a type of gem dragon that could produce sapphires. The red blood sword that Marquis Merlin gifted to Liszt had rubies inlaid on it. They were also gems produced by gem dragons and had mystical powers. The second type was the metal dragon. In the Night Squad novel, the white iron dragon that fought against the sapphire dragon was a metal dragon that could produce iron ore. There were more metal dragons than gem dragons, especially the iron dragons. Liszt had heard a lot about them through the various Night Squad novel. The third type was the elemental dragons, such as fire dragons and water dragons, which were very difficult to tame. Moreover, because of their strong magic elements, their destructive power was astonishing. They could easily destroy towns and injure countless people. In the Night Squad novel, they were often the targets of the Dragon Slayer warriors. Humans were very strange animals. They worshipped dragons but also wanted to kill them. Gem, metal, elemental, which one would the invisible dragon be? Liszt couldn't figure it out. He decided to ask others. He called the butler, Carter. "Mr. Carter, have you heard of the invisible dragon?" Carter thought for a moment. "I have not heard of it, master." In the afternoon, he took the retainer knight to the town to look for Gort and his two friends. He also wanted to try his luck and see where he could get the 3 wild corn plants as a reward. Invisible dragon? Gort touched his chin. "I seem to have heard of it somewhere." "Isaiah, Blair, do you remember?" Isaiah and Blair carefully recalled and shook their heads at the same time. In the end, after half an hour of reminiscing, Gort was unable to recall whether he had heard of the invisible dragon or not. When people get old, they tend to get confused. "Liszt, I am very sorry. Maybe I was mistaken. Sorry for wasting your time. I might not have heard of the invisible dragon." "That's nothing. By the way, Teacher Gort, what are your arrangements for Isaiah and Blair?" "I am in charge of government affairs, Isaiah is in charge of finance, and Blair is in charge of legal affairs and diplomacy. Since there are arrangements, I will leave the development of the flower town to the three of you." Liszt did not stay in the town for long. He was confident that the flower town could be developed and strengthened. However, it was only limited to telling Gort and his subordinates about his intentions and getting them to carry out the specific tasks. First, having him do it himself would be contrary to the aristocratic system. Aristocrats who worked in the fields were not called aristocrats, and aristocrats who ate with serfs were not called aristocrats. Second, if he were to arrange the specific tasks himself, it might not be effective and would be a waste of energy. For example, if he could clearly have his servants complete the census, why would he have to do it himself? With great difficulty, he had finally transmigrated to become an aristocrat. If he did not enjoy it, he would have to work himself to death. After returning to the castle, Liszt mused, "Since the reward is information on the invisible dragon, it means that I probably won't get the reward before I complete the mission. In other words, no one knows what the invisible dragon is. Someone will probably come and tell me after I complete the mission." Chapter 40. Just as Liszt settled the wheat sprite worm's worm stalk, the wheat settlement steward, Gajil, suddenly told him something. "Sir Lord, I don't know if I should say it or not." "Please say it." Liszt's eyes lit up. He felt that the steward might want to reveal information about the invisible dragon. Gajil, however, said, "Sir Lord, I found 3 very strange grasses in the wheat settlement's wasteland. They are extremely tall, 2 or 3 meters tall, and are green and oily. Our chickens are very fond of eating their leaves. It's corn." Liszt immediately realized that the steward was not providing clues about the invisible dragon, but 3 wild corn. He immediately ordered the steward to take him there. Corn, the corn he was looking forward to. But when he arrived before the wild corn, Liszt fell into doubt. Gajeel, how long has it been since you found these 3 grasses? It's been 3 months. Has it always looked like this? Yes, Sir Lord. List habitually touched the red blood sword hanging at his waist. He had always kept this sword close to him. The ruby's magic power constantly stimulated his fire-attributed chi, nourishing it and strengthening it. In other words, he was cultivating all the time while carrying a sword. If he ate more magic potions in the future, he might be able to become a sky knight. List couldn't help but look at the 3 wild corn. The corn in front of him was not a straight pole. It had a few leaves, a cluster of flowers at the top, and 1 or 2 cobs in the middle. Instead, it was randomly divided into a few poles, and each pole had a cluster of flowers on top of it. As for the corn cob in the middle, there were a few tiny toothpicks instead. The toothpicks were segmented, and each segment was a grass seed. Don't tell me that wild corn looks like this. This is not corn, this is wheat. List was very hurt. He knew very well that the 3 wild corn were the 3 grasses in front of him. But he couldn't accept it. What happened to the big, plump corn cob? This is grass for livestock to eat. I remember now. These 3 stalks of wild corn seem to be called Mexican corn grass. List, who had planted crops in his hometown, remembered that someone in the village had planted some kind of pigweed, which was for pigs to eat. It was called Mexican corn grass, and it was said to be a very high-yielding pasture that pigs, cows, and sheep especially like to eat. That should be it. If it's real corn, there's no need to put the word wild in front of it. Corn doesn't seem to have any wild varieties. It's artificially cultivated for millions of years. After he understood this point, he could only sigh in his heart and comfort himself. At least I got a high-yielding pasture. It's not a loss. Get rid of your depressed mood. List put on the reserved smile of a noble again. Gajeel, according to my judgment, this grass is called corn grass. It's a very high-yielding and popular pasture for livestock. Chickens, ducks, geese, pigs, cows, and sheep all like to eat it. From now on, you have to take good care of it. I need its seeds. Yes, Sir Lord. Gajeel will take good care of the corn grass and not let any serfs or livestock get close to it. That's good. I will inform Teacher Gort. When the time comes, he will make further arrangements. You just have to cooperate. Yes, Sir Lord. Glancing at the Mexican corn grass again, List took a deep breath and raised his horsewhip. Return. The little wheat sprite's worm stalk was settled very smoothly. So far, the peanut sprite, alfalfa sprite, tulip sprite, and wheat sprite had all been properly settled. As for the remaining thorn sprite, it was unknown where to go. The corn sprite's corn field was still being planned. In any case, the elves would receive the best care. On the way back, List bumped into Marcus, who was about to come to the castle to see him. Teacher Marcus, what's the matter? Sir, I heard from Sir Gort that you asked him about the invisible dragon. Oh, you know about the invisible dragon? I have heard of it. Marcus said earnestly, I read about it in a half-torn night novel. I don't know the name of the novel, but I read it when I was very young. Is that so? What is the description of the invisible dragon? List knew that the wheat sprite mission was completed and the reward was coming. Marcus said, in the novel, in addition to the gem dragon, metal dragon, and elemental dragon, there is also a kind of dragon called the sacred dragon. The invisible dragon is a kind of sacred dragon. It is transparent and no one can see its appearance. Wherever it goes, it brings endless disasters. Disasters? Then why is it called the sacred dragon? Because it can produce a very special gem. A special gem? Then it should be classified as a gem dragon. Right, what is a special gem? Does it have any different power? This gem is related to a legendary equipment. Sir, have you heard of the space ring? It is a small ring that can hold a lot of things. There are also space rings in this world? List searched the memory of his predecessor, but he had not heard of it. He said, no. Then, are space rings real? Or, can the gems produced by the invisible dragon be used to make space rings? I don't know whether space rings exist or not. Even if they exist, they are priceless treasures that only true great aristocrats can possess. Marcus said, in the night novel I read, it indeed says that wherever the invisible dragon goes, apart from endless disasters, it will also leave behind the gems it produces. Whoever picks them up will have a space ring. And then? And then there is nothing else. Is there no more information about the invisible dragon in the book? No, and I think it is just a fabricated story. You know, many of the novels that enlighten us about the glory of the night are blindly written by novelists. Marcus specially came to tell List this information, but obviously, he did not believe in the existence of the invisible dragon. List could not deny this and continued to ask, then, what about other sacred dragons? I don't know. Half of the book is missing. I only read a small part of the content. It only introduced the invisible dragon, a kind of sacred dragon. After Marcus left, List still did not understand. What was the meaning of the mission reward and information about the invisible dragon? Was it just to tell him about the invisible dragon through the mission? Or did it mean that there was an invisible dragon nearby that could be captured? Or was it to say that the invisible dragon was going to attack the flower town and should be prepared? Of course, it was also possible that the invisible dragon was going to deliver equipment, a space ring? While pondering, the smoke before his eyes reappeared. Mission completed. Reward, information about the invisible dragon. After a moment of distortion, a new mission was issued. Mission: did the sudden appearance of wild corn in the wheat settlement attract your attention? Lord, you need to think about why wild corn grew in the wheat settlement. Perhaps there is more wild corn in the vicinity. Please find the origin of the wild corn. Reward: new information about the invisible dragon. Quickly, List's attention was focused on the new mission reward. Chapter 41. Looking at the problem calmly and objectively, List freed himself from his unrealistic fantasies about dragons. He felt that the so-called information about the invisible dragon might not be a good reward. According to his previous inference. First, the smoke mission seemed to be popularizing science. However, this did not make any sense. As a cheat, it should not be so boring. Second, there was an invisible dragon nearby that could be captured. If it was true, then it would definitely be explosive news. However, List did not have the strength to capture a dragon. Most of the countries with dragons started with young dragons as they could not withstand adult dragons. However, even if it was just a young dragon, the entire Coral Island would still not be able to defeat it with all the night. Third, the invisible dragon came from afar to deliver the equipment. List did not feel that his affinity with dragons was that good. Fourth, the invisible dragon was probably going to attack the flower town. The fourth inference was undoubtedly the most likely. Dragons attacking human villages and towns was no longer big news. Otherwise, the profession, Dragon Slayer, would not have arisen. In the major night novels, the Dragon Slayer was a popular protagonist, second only to the Dragon Knight. Basically, in a qualified night novel, the protagonist would become a dragon knight or slay a dragon, and then marry a beautiful princess. Therefore, the rewards of these two missions tell me that I have to resist a dragon and strive to become the protagonist of a night novel, the Dragon Slayer List. List looked in the mirror and chuckled. So, if the dragon dies, then where is the princess? List's mood was a bit complicated. He was worried that his speculation would come true, but he also felt that it was impossible. After thinking it over, he felt that there was no need to be groundless fears. He should first complete the missions and see what kind of clues the final reward would give before making a decision. If the invisible dragon really invaded and he could not resist it, then it did not mean that he could not ask for help. Once this information was sent to the Sapphire family, he believed that it should not be difficult to get the title of Marquis. This was the highest title that could be conferred in a principality. After calling Gort, he immediately handed over the mission: "This corn grass will not suddenly appear. The seeds must have been blown over by birds or the wind. Teacher Gort, mobilize all the idle farmers to search between the settlements. We must find more corn grass." Gort did not quite understand the mission. "List, is this corn grass very important?" "Of course, it's a kind of pasture with very high nutritional value. It's even more suitable than alfalfa as fodder for horse farms and dairy farms. No matter what, it's better to plant different kinds of pasture so that the livestock can grow faster. Since it's so valuable, I'll immediately arrange for people to search for it. I won't miss a single corner." Just as they were talking, List suddenly saw a group of people walking past the gate in an orderly manner outside the castle, heading south towards the Thorns Ridge. "Teacher Gort, is that the new patrol team?" "Yes, your retainer knight has been a great help. At first, those bastards in the patrol team refused to obey the orders of an administrative officer like me, but after a few fights, they quickly restrained their temper. Well done. Discipline is the first priority of the patrol team. Teacher Gort, the management of the patrol team needs to continue to be strengthened. I have a few ideas that need to be implemented. The patrol team needs to take on the public security of the fief and the settlements. The fief will pay them. They also need to unify their uniforms and conduct themselves in a uniform manner." List outlined some general ideas. He intended to establish the patrol team as a police station. For the time being, they would only be responsible for public security. In the future, they would also be responsible for household registration. In this way, they could thoroughly understand everything about the fief. Anyone with a suspicious identity would not be able to gain a foothold in the flower town. However, there are only a few Naldas in the fief. Isaiah has complained to me more than once that he can't do anything without a Nalda. There were not many gold coins in List's castle. The butler had previously reported to him that there were still about 150 gold coins. However, the castle was currently very fat. Just List's red blood sword alone was worth 1 to 2,000 gold coins. There was also the annual profit from the black tulip industry as well as the large amount of materials exchanged for assimilation. I will allocate 50 gold coins from the castle to maintain the fief's development. This portion of gold coins will be deducted from the fief's annual tax. 50 Naldas? That is too much. List, I have looked it up. The fief's annual tax revenue is only a pitiful 15 Naldas. 50 Naldas is not much. Teacher Gort, tell Isaiah and Blair that the flower town will enter a busy period. They should be prepared. As you wish. List was not joking about the flower town's development. He had already started drawing a map of the fief. It was a very abstract and crude topographic map. Basically, the flower town was like a right-angled triangle. The two right-angled sides were the Thorns Ridge and the oblique side was the east coast. The fief was located in the center of the triangle. The castle was located near the right angle. The dairy farm and the barley settlement occupied the other two corners. If you want to get rich, you must first build a road. Holding a quill, he drew the dirt road from the Thorns Ridge to the fief. I need to build a gravel road for this main road. There is no cement, but there is a lot of sand. The east coast has a lot of sand, which can be used to pave the road. Then there was the mud road between the settlements, which could all be paved with sand. However, it was not a good choice to pave the road with sand alone. It was difficult to drain the accumulated water, and it would also pour into the shoes, leaving sand everywhere. Unfortunately, there were not many stones in the vicinity of the flower town, so it was impossible to mix sand with stone. As such, sand roads could only be built. It was more convenient than mud roads, which could not be used when it rained. Building roads was a big deal, and the other was farming. Sprites could influence the growth of crops, but they could not be relied on entirely. Previously, when there were no sprites in the flower town, the fief's farmers still had to farm. Scientific farming has only completed the first step, which is to let the subjects know to fertilize the crops. However, this is not enough. I still need to forge a batch of farming tools to increase the productivity of the farmers, so that more wasteland can be reclaimed to grow crops. I have exchanged for a pile of iron from Tulip Castle and Falcon Town, and I can contact the blacksmith shop. These two things were urgently needed, but the results could not be seen at the moment. However, there was another thing that could quickly bear fruit, gathering at the sea. On the back of Fiery Dragon, List gazed at the endless sea in front of him. The salty smell of the seawater assailed his nostrils. Waves splashed on the beach, reflecting the sunlight. For a moment, his eyes were filled with small stars. Thomas held Dosen's hand and let it play on the beach. Dosen developed very quickly. He could see it grow up almost every day. It was now the size of a rural dog. Perhaps it was because of the good food it ate, but there were already traces of magic power circulating on its body. It might not need to reach adulthood before it could release magic. List was ready to seize the opportunity to train it to prevent it from being too wild and hurting people. Sir, is there anything worth paying attention to on the East Coast? There are no deep bays here, so it is not suitable for a dock. Marcus looked at the waves, still not feeling that there was anything valuable in the sea. Chapter 42. The tide is beginning to ebb, Master. Thomas pulled Dosen and said to List. Give Dosen to me. You, Tom, and Jesse will look for the seafood according to the method I told you. List took the rope from Dosen. Dosen still wanted to run outside to chase flowers. List suddenly shouted, Quiet, Dosen. Dosen did not listen. List dismounted from his horse, stretched out his hand, and pressed Dosen on the sand, making it unable to move. He loudly ordered, Dosen, quiet. Woo-woo. Dosen uttered two unknown sounds. Unable to struggle, it could only obediently lie down. Then List slowly let go. Trembling Wood struggled to move again and ran outside. List again pressed it down and ordered it to be quiet. After repeating this several times, Dosen finally stopped moving. At this time, the retainer knight Carl hurriedly handed over a piece of cured meat, which List rewarded to Dosen, Quiet, and you will have meat to eat. Dosen, do you understand? Woo-woo. Dosen crazily tore at the cured meat and wolfed it down. Before it went out, List specifically told Thomas not to feed it. Only hunger could make an animal have a deep memory, better form a conditioned reflex, and achieve obedience training. Sir, you have a talent for World of Warcraft taming. I can foresee that in the future, Dosen will be a qualified domesticated World of Warcraft. Of course, if it cannot do it, I will slaughter it halfway. Last night, the flying dust dog smoked meat tasted very good. Even in Longtaro Castle, I have only eaten World of Warcraft meat a few times. The meat of the large flying dust dog was not sold, it was left in the castle to be marinated and air-dried. It is indeed a delicacy. When I eat it, I can feel the magic power nourishing my body. Marcus had also eaten in the castle last night. After training Dosen for a while, List handed Dosen over to Carl. He rode to the shore after the tide had ebbed to see how the serving men were doing. At this time, the three male servants, Thomas, Tom, and Jesse, each wore a pair of thick leather gloves. They carried buckets, hammers, and shovels, and were constantly busy. Thomas was in charge of turning over the rocks and looking for seafood above and below the rocks. Jesse was responsible for shoveling the sand and looking for seafood under the sand. Tom, on the other hand, was in charge of picking up all kinds of seafood that could not be returned to the sea in time and were forced to be stranded. Teacher Marcus, do you know the relationship between the ebb and flow of the tide and the moon at night? List was in a good mood and asked a question. Marcus shook his head. I don't know. The moon is constantly moving. It attracts the seawater, the ebb and flow of the tide. Of course, the sun also attracts it, but the sun is much farther away and not as attractive as the moon. I don't understand what you know at all, my lord. Marcus was already being polite. The moon and the sun attract seawater? If it were someone else, he would have spat in their face. Don't talk about eggs. Then he would have retorted that you say the moon and sun attract seawater, why don't you suck us humans into the sky so that everyone can fly and be sky knight? Don't lie to me that I'm not well educated. Seeing Marcus's expression, Liszt felt bored. Ignorant natives. After a moment of lamentation, he thought to himself, since the moon here can also cause tides, does that mean that this world is indeed a planet? If he sailed along the azure wave sea, would he be able to circle around the planet and return to this place? If that's true, maybe one day I can send a fleet to sail around the world? This idea was a bit distant, and Liszt did not continue to think about it. He rode his horse to Tom's side. Tom hurriedly saluted, "My lord." "You do your thing, I'm just looking." At a glance, he saw that Tom's bucket was filled with clams, conches, starfish, crabs, sea rainbows, clams and seaweed, as well as some insects like sea centipedes and sea cockroaches. However, sea cockroaches and sea centipedes could run and accidentally fall out of the bucket. So Tom had to clumsily pick them up again. These two kinds of insects that can run are not seafood, you can throw them away. Liszt reminded. "Oh, yes, yes, my lord." Tom hurriedly threw the insects away again. He didn't know if it was because the Lord was around, but he kept trying to catch them but couldn't, and he was sweating profusely. Not far away, Thomas, who was moving the rocks, saw Tom's bewildered look, turned his head and smiled proudly. Among the 3 serving men of the castle, only he was good enough to be the suitable successor to the butler. Because on the other side, Jesse, who was digging for a long time, didn't catch any of the razor clams and mantis shrimps that the Lord had instructed him to. He dug randomly, not knowing that he had to dig through the small holes of the seafood. What a waste! He thought in his heart. So he happily took the hammer and hammered under the rocks, knocking down clams, sea rainbows, and oysters one by one. Occasionally, he could also pick up a few small crabs. Oysters need to scoop out their flesh, just like this. Thomas smashed the shell of the oyster with a hammer and dug out the soft flesh inside. Before leaving, the Sir Lord had said that oyster flesh was delicious. Thomas did not think that this kind of ugly and soft thing was delicious, but he would meticulously complete the Sir Lord's instructions. It was effortless. The exposed rocks after the ebb were full of oysters, sea rainbows, and the like. In just 2 hours, Thomas had filled up the 2 buckets he had brought. One of the buckets was filled with meat from the oysters. He looked at Tom again. Although the bucket was full, the Sir Lord had told him several times not to pick up some things, but he still went to pick them up. It was clearly the same kind of insect, but he thought it was different. He was so stupid. As for Jesse, he could be ignored. He dug until he was covered in sweat, and the bucket had just reached the bottom. There were a few fat shrimps, the Sir Lord said they were mantis shrimps, and a few stick-like razor clams, which seemed to be called bamboo razor clams. He put down his bucket full of oyster flesh, puffed out his chest, and waited for the Sir Lord's inspection. Liszt, who had spent most of his time under the coconut tree on horseback, saw that it was almost noon and the sun was already as hot as fire, so he stopped the beachcombing experiment. He rode over and looked at each bucket. "Tom, you have to work harder to distinguish between pests and seafood. Not everything on the beach can be eaten. If it is poisonous, it will poison people." Tom lowered his head in shame. "I'm sorry, master, I'm too stupid to distinguish." "It doesn't matter, Tom. It's your first time combing the sea, so it's normal to be inexperienced. Don't feel guilty about it." Liszt comforted him, then turned to Jesse's bucket. "Well, Jesse, I can see your diligence, but it's obvious that you haven't applied the method I taught you. Master, I dug hard, but I kept digging and digging, and the hole disappeared. Jessie said in a panic. You need to dig in the direction of the hole. I can continue to stay here and dig, Master. I can definitely dig until the bucket is full. If you stay here, no one in the castle will dive. Jessie, I don't mean to blame you. Digging mantis shrimp and razor clams is not easy in itself. Finally, List walked in front of Thomas's buckets. One bucket was full of oyster flesh, and the other was full of crabs, sea rainbows, and so on. Well done, Thomas. Thank you for the compliment, Master. This is what I should do. I will do my best to do things for Master. Thomas beamed with joy. List responded with an aristocratic smile, expressing his approval of Thomas. Of course, he knew what Thomas was thinking. Butler Carter had already told him that Thomas was ambitious. But as the Lord, he did not care, because no matter how ambitious Thomas was, he only wanted to be the castle's butler. If he really had the ability, old Carter would not be able to do it. So what if Thomas was the butler? Chapter 43. After returning to the castle with a bunch of seafood, List didn't immediately let the kitchen cook them. These seafood were indeed similar to the seafood in his memory, but whether it was edible or poisonous, he needed to verify it. The verification was very simple. Marcus took the few hunters in the town to the periphery of the Thorns Ridge to set traps and capture several wolves, wild cats, and other carnivorous beasts. The wolves, wild cats, and other beasts in the cages were hungry. The seafood was thrown in and was immediately gobbled up by the beasts. The cooked seafood was then given to another group of beasts. After waiting for a day, the next day, except for 2 beasts that died after eating some sea urchins, the other beasts were still alive and kicking, showing no signs of poisoning. This shows that the seafood at the seaside is actually similar to the seafood on Earth, except for the sea urchins. Then remove the sea urchins and have the remaining edible seafood made into specimens for the farmers to compare. After thinking about it, List wasn't in a hurry to have people gather seafood. He needed to let others understand that seafood was delicious and not something that tasted bad. Many seafood could be eaten raw, but List didn't recommend it. He felt that eating too much seafood would easily cause one to be infected by the parasites inside. Without medical conditions, being infected with parasites could only wait for death. Therefore, he called over the cook, Abby Ladle. Mrs. Abby, let me tell you how to cook seafood. Do you see this crab? Brush it clean with a brush and steam it. This mantis shrimp, brush it clean and boil it in plain water. Look at this clam. You can use it to make soup or stir-fry it. Also, this oyster meat can be eaten raw, but I don't eat raw seafood. You need to boil it or stir-fry it. We have a lot of oyster meat here. I call it oyster. If you can't eat it, you can dry it and boil it to get oil. Oyster, scientific name oyster, also called oyster, was a kind of shellfish. It was a precious ingredient. In his hometown, List liked to eat oyster very much because oyster was rich in zinc. Zinc had an important impact on the development of secondary sexual characteristics. If there was a trace of zinc in the blood, one would be full of vigor, therefore. Oysters would definitely become an indispensable delicacy on Baron's dining table. Fortunately, the flower town was bordered by the sea and had not been over-harvested. The sea was densely packed with oysters, so there was no need to worry about a lack of zinc. The 16-year-old List was still in the period of rapid development. He could only become stronger by eating more. After teaching Abby Ladle how to cook seafood, List was not looking forward to eating seafood for the first time in this world. In fact, he had already eaten it. In Long Taro Castle, fishermen had picked up rock lobsters from the sea. As an archipelago country, the Grand Duchy of Sapphire had many fishermen. Naturally, some of the serfs would go to the sea to beg for food and discover the delicious seafood. It was just that transportation was inconvenient and information was blocked, so it was impossible to spread the seafood recipes of the various islands. On the Coral Island, the Tulip family had not finished reclaiming the wasteland and had no motivation to open up the sea. Therefore, the subjects of Flower Town had never thought of catching seafood for more than a decade or two. This is Mrs. Abby's first time cooking seafood. I'm afraid that she can't even steam the crabs well. I can only let her continue to explore how to cook the best and slowly improve her cooking skills. Sure enough. At noon, at the castle's dining table, List ate the familiar seafood, but he could not find the familiar taste. The crabs were steamed too hard, the mantis shrimp were boiled too soft, the oysters were stir-fried too hard, and the clam soup was full of sand. However, he still ate a lot with relish. It was much more delicious than the bread and barbecue he usually ate. Marcus, Gort, Isaiah, and Blair accompanied List to eat the seafood banquet. Delicious. Marcus gave a simple evaluation and then buried his head in the mantis shrimp and crab. Isaiah smiled, delicious. Blair gave a thumbs up, a rare delicacy. Gort was the most exaggerated. At first, he disliked the ugly appearance of the oyster meat and could not eat it. But when he tasted the taste, he could not stop. The plate in front of him was swept clean and he ordered 2 more. He drank a mouthful of hops beer and ate a piece of oyster. His wrinkled face was full of happiness. I remember. What do you remember? List skillfully opened the shell of the crab. When I was young, I traveled to an island called Flying Fish Island. In the islanders' homes, I ate this oyster. At that time, I was drunk, ate a lot of oysters, and had a wonderful night. After I sobered up and left Flying Fish Island, I never found that delicacy again. I did not expect to find it again now. Then eat more. Maybe something wonderful will happen tonight. List smiled faintly. He already knew that Gort had found a young girl in town. The young girl was only 16 or 17 years old. If the other party had not voluntarily followed Gort, List would definitely have stopped this behavior of an old cow eating young grass. Gort laughed, who knows? In any case, I've already fallen in love with oysters. Isaiah and Blair gave a tacit laugh. They were all adults and understood the meaning behind their words. Even Marcus had an expectant expression in his eyes. He turned his head and began to eat the oyster. In the living room upstairs, the nobles and knight were happily enjoying the delicious seafood. In the kitchen downstairs, the servants were also enjoying the happiness brought about by the seafood. This mantis shrimp is really delicious. If I did not eat it myself, who would have thought that such an ugly bug would be so delicious? Irene Four Fingers ate heartily. Abby said with dissatisfaction, little girl, don't eat so crudely. You're just like a boy. I'm just a kitchen maid. Why can't I eat like this? I used to eat like this at home. Even Mr. Carter did not scold me. Carter elegantly cut the oyster. As a butler, he always strived to conform to the temperament of a noble butler, including eating. He also asked the other servants to try to be as close to noble etiquette as possible. Hearing this, he said, Irene, you've seen Miss Li Weiwei's personal maid. Maybe you should learn how she eats. I don't want to learn from her. Pinching her fingers and cutting a knife. If I didn't know better, I would think that she was a noble lady. Even the master praised Big Sister Maggie's manners, but Big Sister Maggie doesn't eat like that. Maggie said with a smile, I grew up in the village, but no one taught me how to eat elegantly. However, I'm learning from Mrs. Morrison. She worked in Tulip Castle before. The maids there know more about noble etiquette than many noble ladies. Moss and Patty pinched the mantis shrimp's head and squeezed out the meat. That's because nobles have the right to break the rules. We servants must strictly follow them, otherwise we will face harsh punishment. Irene suddenly shouted, the master will not punish the servants. Tom broke the castle's vase yesterday, but the master did not scold him. The master is benevolent. I will definitely not break things next time. Tom had a respectful expression on his face. Chapter 44. The banquet was over. List got down to business. I am going to build a new settlement on the east coast to house some serfs as fishermen. The farmers were very busy during the planting season, but after planting the crops, they would become very idle. List felt that this was an unreasonable allocation of human resources. It would be better to free up a part of the farmers and focus on developing the offshore fishery, the coastal fishery. Now that there were no ships, even if they wanted to go fishing, it would be impossible. Such delicacies should indeed be harvested more. However, the fief's population is too small. We don't even have 2,000 people. The settlement's agricultural production cannot be separated from the serfs' labor force. I will think of a way to increase the population. List didn't say much. In fact, he had already discussed with Levis that he would purchase serfs from Levis in exchange for a share of the Black Tulip. The Count's fleet would go out to sea to trade, so it could carry a lot of serfs when it returned. These serfs might come from war-torn islands or the continent. Gort seemed to understand. Since you said so, then I will immediately start planning for the new settlement. Sir Baron, what is the name of the new settlement? Asked Isaiah. Let's call it, the Oyster Settlement. List had great expectations for the Oyster Settlement. He hoped that after the settlement was built, a group of serfs would be converted into fishermen who would continuously fish for seafood, provide food for the flower town, and provide a material foundation for the future construction. Every winter, the flower town's subjects would hide at home and sleep to reduce food consumption. With food, the cold of winter was nothing. A lot of construction could start in winter. In the evening, Gort came to the castle again. The corn grass was found. The patrol finally did something serious. They found a batch of corn grass at the edge of the Thorns Ridge in the southwest corner of the fief. Take me to see it. Before the sky turned dark, List saw with his own eyes a large area of corn grass, mixed with other weeds. Compared to the 3 wild corn plants in the wheat settlement, these corn grasses were much shorter, probably due to malnutrition. List turned around and felt a little disappointed. This was probably the origin of corn grass, but there were no signs of sprite worms being bred. Without sprite worms, it would be very difficult for corn grass to develop. Moreover, with the help of sprite worms, it was impossible to gradually improve the breed and get closer to the corn cob. Keep an eye on them. You must collect the seeds well. When we return to the town, choose a suitable place to plant a batch of them in the fields. This will provide a new breed of pasture for the horse farm and dairy farm. At night, after taking a shower, List was reading in his study. Smoke serpentines condensed before his eyes, mission completed. Rewarded with new information on the invisible dragon. In a flash, the smoke distorted and a new mission was issued. Mission: the fishing industry has been put on the Lord's agenda. A group of serfs will soon be driven into the sea by you. Commanding subjects was a necessary skill for a lord, but sustainable development was more important. Please upgrade the equipment of the fishermen. Reward: a large patch of smoked grass. A big patch of smoked grass. What is that? Tobacco? Upgrading the fisherman's equipment was a very simple task. Even if the smoke mission had not been issued, he would still have done it. There were no tools for fishing, and he could not let the fishermen use their hands. The rocks after the tide had receded were very sharp, and if one was not careful, they could cut their fingers. The mission reward was no longer information on the invisible dragon, which made List feel somewhat relieved. Bing began to look forward to what the smoke grass was. Smoking was popular among the aristocrats. The Tulip family had planted a lot of tobacco and even had a tobacco lesser sprite. Therefore, the smoke grass should not be tobacco. There are tobacco seeds among the seeds traded from Tulip Castle. If I want to plant them, I can plant them at any time. List no longer worried about it. Sooner or later, he would know what the smoke grass was. He waved his hand to disperse the smoke serpentines and continued to read. The Count honored his words. When List returned, he sent him a carriage full of books. At present, he was reading an autobiographical novel called Earth Ranger Griff's Travels. From a first-person point of view, the book introduced the experiences of an Earth Knight named Griff, who traveled through the Grand Duchy of Maple Leaf. The story was very interesting. Although a lot of the content, in List's view, was purely obscene, such as having an affair with the Countess, eloping with the young Miss Marchioness, and chatting merrily and wittily with the Grand Duke of Maple Leaf. This was not the treatment that a descendant of a fallen aristocrat, who was not even a Lord Knight, could enjoy. However, the author of the book was certainly a person with rich experience. He introduced a lot of customs and practices that were very different from Coral Island, as well as the decadent lives of some aristocrats, and many hearsay stories. Very interesting. List liked this kind of novel, where he could read the story and gain knowledge. While he was reading, the story suddenly jumped to a dragon-slaying battle, in which Griff traveled to a small town that was being invaded by an invisible creature. The lord of the small town had fled, and the people were powerless to resist. At this time, Griff decided to save the suffering people. After observing it, he concluded that it was an invisible dragon. However, the book did not mention how he observed it and came to this conclusion. The invisible dragon is a mystical dragon hidden in another world. Only the most courageous and upright knight can see it. I am not courageous enough. If I want to see it, I have to summon my courage. I have to find it, face it, and find its weakness. Griff thus succeeded in courting death. He arrived in front of the invisible dragon and was beaten to the point of vomiting blood by the invisible dragon. But because of this, he saw the invisible dragon. Ah, what a beautiful dragon it is! It is like a flowing crystal, colorless and transparent all over. I vomited blood, and the blood actually passed through its body. Yes, I can't touch it. I am very depressed, because I may never be able to ride it. List admired Griff's tenacity. He was about to be beaten to death by the invisible dragon, yet he still regretted not being able to ride the dragon. Fortunately, Griff was self-aware. I knew it wanted to kill me. I couldn't see its eyes and could only see a vague mass of water, but I knew it wanted to kill me. I could feel its mood. I had already forgotten about life and death. I just wanted to smoke a cigarette or two at the last moment. Oh, sorry, I don't have any tobacco. I had to randomly grab a handful of grass next to me and chew it to resist my addiction. Reading up to this point, List raised his eyebrows. He continued to read. Later, I learned that the grass I grabbed is called smoke grass. It is a grass very similar to tobacco, but its taste is unique, just like the socks I wore for 16 or 26 days without washing. I was about to vomit. Yes, at that moment, I successfully quit smoking. I swore that I would never smoke again. I was addicted to smoking for 17 years. When I was a child, my father liked to smoke the tobacco he rolled himself. He would ask me, "Hey, Griff, do you smoke?" The latter part of the book was about his father teaching him how to smoke. Chapter 45. Fortunately, after more than 500 words of reminiscence, Griff finally returned to the dragon-slaying storyline. I must assure you that I sincerely vowed to quit smoking, but I later forgot because I was shocked by the invisible dragon's actions. Heavens, it actually snatched the smoke grass from my hand and ate it. I think it must have not taken a bath for many years and had a misconception about the taste. Sorry for speaking ill of the invisible dragon. In fact, we later became friends. Because it ate my smoke grass, it did not kill me, and I succeeded in exchanging a bundle of smoke grass and 2 cows for the invisible dragon's friendship. Frankly speaking, the invisible dragon is not big, only a little bigger than a house. I have seen the Maple Leaf Grand Duke's bronze dragon. It is a beautiful metal dragon nearly 30 meters long. The invisible dragon is like its child. Oh, dragons don't have children. We had a pleasant afternoon together. In the evening, it came to me, shook its body, and then a gem fell into my hand. It flew away, but it left behind its gem, a gem the size of a fingernail. Since then, I have always worn it on my finger. Now you know where my space ring came from. Countless noble knights were willing to pay everything in exchange for this ring, but I will not exchange it, because it is a testimony of the friendship between me and the invisible dragon. At this point, the invisible dragon chapter came to an end. Griff quickly moved on to the next story, the Battle of Wits with the Headless Knight. After List quickly flipped through the roughly 50,000 words novel, there was no more information about the invisible dragon. Even the space ring only made an appearance once. It was as if Griff had just remembered to write about the invisible dragon, and then forgot everything after writing. It seems that the reward this time is the knowledge about the invisible dragon recorded in Earth Ranger Griff's travels. Only brave and upright people can see the invisible dragon? In that case, I reckon that there is no possibility of seeing it. It is neither brave nor upright. He was very self-aware. However, he seriously doubted the authenticity of this information. How could it be possible to rely on such intangible, unseen, and inexplicable characters to decide whether to see the invisible dragon or not? This story feels like a reenactment of Only Pure Maidens Can Meet Unicorns. Many of the female protagonists in knight novels were the daughters of nobles who rode on unicorns. List had read a few of them, and all of them swore that only pure, beautiful, innocent, and kind virgins could be accepted by unicorns. As for the existence of a legendary creature like the unicorn, List expressed his doubts. He had doubts about the unicorn and also about the invisible dragon. In particular, only a brave and upright knight could see the invisible dragon. He quickly captured useful information. Griff used smoke grass to resist the invisible dragon's slaughter. Later, he said that he used a bundle of grass and 2 cows to exchange for the invisible dragon's gem. My current smoke mission rewards smoke grass. It seems that this is also part of a chain mission. The first reward was information on the invisible dragon. Next was the new information about the invisible dragon. Now, the reward was smoke grass, which the invisible dragon loved to eat. All of the rewards were related, as if a large-scale chain mission had been unlocked. Therefore, the mission's objective was very easy to infer. There might really be an invisible dragon that was going to invade the flower town. Cows? List thought of another link. The dairy farm seems to have 2 old cows that cannot produce milk. However, the castle has plenty of food and has not used them to entertain guests. Perhaps, these 2 old cows are the dinner I need to prepare for the invisible dragon? The information was still not clear enough, and the preparations were still not sufficient. List felt that the urgent matter at hand was to continue with the mission and get more details about the invisible dragon chain mission so that he could formulate a response strategy. Knock, knock. There was a knock on the door. Please come in. The butler old Carter walked in with an oil lamp in hand. Master, it is already late, you should rest early. I am about to go to bed. List closed the book and put it back on the bookshelf. He frowned slightly because of the unpleasant smell on his hands. Mr. Carter, while you are at it, light up a box of air freshener in the study. I really can't stand the strange smell of this thick bast paper. This time, the carriage of books gifted by the Count carried a large amount of stench. Although List had already lit the air freshener, it still could not cover up the stench. There was no such thing as clean and snow-white paper. There was only thick bast paper that had turned yellow and carried a lingering stench. This kind of paper was made from the inner layer of animal leather, which was peeled off and specially tanned. The production cost was very high, but it was not easy to preserve and it was not convenient to write on. List really wanted to produce white paper as soon as possible to replace this thick bast paper. However, he also understood that now was not the right time. First, white paper was not urgently needed. Second, there was no copyright law. Greater aristocrats could snatch the papermaking technology at any time. Just as he had not set about researching horseshoes, saddles, or cement, he still had the general structure of a schooner in his mind. Once invented, it would definitely promote the development of the age of navigation. In fact, the most important thing was that there was no one. The entire town had a total of 1990 people, no, 1991 people. Recently, 2 elderly people had died in the town, giving birth to 4 newborns, one of which had died. Of these 1991 people, apart from the elderly and children who had no labor force, it was already very rare for there to be 1,500 people working. They had to farm, build roads, and now they had to build an oyster settlement. Soon, they had to send out a group of people to sew gloves, cast hammers, and shovels, and produce fishing equipment for the fishermen. As for Liszt himself, he was also very busy. He had to practice unceasingly. He had already grasped the fiery dragon drill and fire surge fluctuations, but he needed time to master them. After obtaining the red blood sword, he became even more diligent in his cultivation, hoping that he could break through the shackles of the earth and soar into the sky. Carter lit the air freshener and blew out a candle. He blew out a candle and said, "Master, shouldn't the castle hire a few more servants? Is there not enough manpower?" Liszt was a little surprised. 10 servants should be enough to serve him alone. Carter solemnly said, "The wheat sprite, peanut sprite, tulip sprite, and alfalfa sprite are all good babies, but their worm stalks need to be patrolled and taken care of by male servants every day. This work is arranged for Jessie. Now the corn has also begun to be planted, and the thorn sprite worm also needs to be settled. Jessie is too busy." After a pause, he continued, "Dosen, Black Dragon, Fiery Dragon, and several other horses all need to be taken care of. Before the oyster settlement is built, the castle's seafood has to be collected by the servants. There is also the kitchen. With the increasing number of dishes, Mrs. Abbey is already complaining that she is unable to split herself. The castle, the city, and the town overlapped in many ways. However, the castle was more inclined towards self-cultivation, while the town governed the entire territory and collected taxes. Liszt was not satisfied with this system, feeling that it hindered the development of productivity. The biggest obstacle was the castle. It was a twisted monster that controlled all the sprites and firmly bound the greatest productivity. After all, the biggest role of the castle was to provide the aristocracy with a luxurious life, not to liberate productivity. He understood this point, but he didn't have many thoughts of changing it. After all, he was an aristocrat. "Since there is not enough manpower, Mr. Carter, you will be responsible for recruiting new servants." Chapter 46. Big Lily, where is Little Lily? What's the matter, old Abel? Little Lily is feeding the chickens in the yard. Big Jasmine was a middle-aged woman with a stooped back from years of hard work. A bright smile appeared on old Abel's wrinkled face. "It's good news. Sir Lord's castle is recruiting new servants. I heard from Mr. Butler Carter that he wants to recruit 3 serving men, a maid, and a kitchen maid. Big Lily, Little Lily can apply for the position of maid." "Really? Sir Lord really wants to recruit a new maid? Is this true? That's great." Big Lily ran into the house. "I'm going to tell Little Lily." Hurry up, hurry up." By the time old Abel finished speaking, Big Jasmine had already disappeared. He shook his head with a smile and muttered, "I have to go back and tell everyone the good news. In the castle, they can drink milk every day. What a wonderful life. The children are blessed." Soon, all 48 serfs in the Barley settlement learned of the news. "This is really good news. I was complaining that Malfoy had no more fields to farm and could only open up wastelands. He is strong, diligent and capable. Apart from eating a lot, he can definitely do a good job as a serving man. That's not necessarily true. Parker is more diligent and polite. I think he will definitely be able to apply. Is the news true? Sir Lord will recruit servants from the countryside? It was old Abel who said it. He has been forging tools for Sir Lord in the blacksmith shop for the past few days. How could his words be false? Old Abel has good craftsmanship, but can he still lift the hammer? He doesn't need to do it himself. Sir Lord will arrange for an apprentice to hit the hammer. Remember the lame Peter? He went to the blacksmith shop to be an apprentice. Sir Lord pays him a copper coin a day. Isn't the blacksmith shop owned by the old drunkard? The old drunkard has long sold the blacksmith shop to Sir Lord. Ho ho, he sold it for 3 naldas. 3 naldas. My God, Sir Lord is so generous. Good news was always like a bird with wings, quickly flying past everyone's ears. Little Lily, who was feeding the chickens in the yard, was so excited that her face turned red. Mom, can I really apply to be a maid? Old Abel brought the news. He wouldn't lie. Little Lily, you need to prepare well. As long as you can enter the castle, you will be able to live a good life. Big Lily said with joy. But, will Sir Lord choose me? Have some confidence in yourself, little Lily. You're the most outstanding girl in the Barley settlement. You're hardworking and capable. You're my pride. Of course, you can take a step back. Sir Lord wants to recruit a maid and a kitchen maid. You can apply for the position of a kitchen maid. You're the cleanest in washing vegetables. Yes, I know what to do, Mom. Little Lily's eyes flashed with determination. In order to have a good life in the future, she must show enough excellence to apply to be a maid in the castle. Without a father, her mother had to support her and her 2 younger brothers. Their lives were very poor. She had already grown up and had to share the burden of the family. The 17-year-old girl secretly clenched her fists. In the blacksmith shop, List watched several old blacksmiths and apprentices busily forge iron ingots. List took out the iron ingots he obtained from the black tulip assimilation trade and used them to forge farming tools. The first to forge was the fisherman's equipment. Shovels, hammers, and awls. With these 3 kinds of equipment, the fisherman could harvest seafood. The seafood resources on the Flower Town's east coast had not been exploited, nor had they suffered any pollution. The abundant shellfish and crabs could be easily caught without much skill. Teacher Gort, has the selection of the fishermen started? List took the handkerchief handed over by Marcus and wiped the sweat from his forehead. He was already accustomed to being served by a valet. As long as there was no physical contact, it was still very enjoyable to have someone serve him tea. Gort could only take out his handkerchief and wipe his sweat. Your request has been conveyed. The clerks are doing publicity in each settlement. The fishermen only accept the elderly, women, and some children who have not yet grown up. That's right. Gathering the sea does not require too much physical strength, it only requires patience. It is a reasonable allocation of human resources to let the farmers who are not very efficient in farming gather the sea. However, you must do a good job in publicizing that poisoned seafood cannot be touched and raw seafood cannot be eaten. The medical and hygienic means of this world were extremely underdeveloped. Aristocrats cultivated qi and rarely got sick, so they had no motivation to study medicine. List also did not understand medicine. All he could do was to make his subjects focus on prevention, hygiene, drinking boiled water, and eating cooked food. It is their luck to have met you, List. You have a unique charm. Gort flattered. Ordinary young aristocrats would probably become complacent after being flattered a few words. List had the soul of an adult and his 3 views had long been mature. It was impossible for him to be blinded by a few words. He just instructed, do not stop the forging of ironware, but do not let the blacksmiths tire themselves out. Adjust their wages from 5 copper coins to 6 copper coins, and the apprentices to 2 copper coins. Apprentices who did odd jobs were paid 1 copper coin a day. Masters who handled hammers were paid 5 copper coins a day. This was the wage that Liszt had previously offered. Relatively speaking, it was quite high. Nowadays, the rich and overbearing baron disdained exploiting the commoners for a few copper coins. It should be noted that the red-blood sword at his waist was worth 1 or 2,000 gold coins. That was more than 100,000 silver coins, or more than 10 million copper coins. Besides, the entire flower town was his. His subjects being rich was no different from him being rich. He could adjust the tax rate at will and collect taxes however he wanted. 6 copper coins a day, oh, what a lucky blacksmith! Gort muttered. Then he walked into the blacksmith's forging room and shouted, "Mr. Blacksmiths, Sir Lord has just decided to increase your wages from 5 copper coins a day to 6 copper coins a day. Apprentices can also get 2 copper coins a day. Work hard, Sir Lord's generosity is not something you can imagine." Wow! 6 copper coins a day. Long live Sir Lord! Praise Sir Lord! Old Jack will forge ironware for Sir Lord for the rest of his life. Apprentices can also get 2 copper coins a day. Heavens, my mom and dad will be so happy. The smithy was filled with laughter and the complaints about the stuffy heat dissipated. Everyone was working hard to repay the generous Sir Lord Liszt. Hearing the cheers inside, Liszt shook his head. He might be benevolent and unwilling to squeeze the serf class, but he also used a little profit to drive the serf's production efficiency. Compared to squeezing, he preferred to create, rationally allocate production resources, and vigorously improve work efficiency, so as to make perfect use of the town's population of less than 2,000. Master, are you going back? Chapter 47. Lily Bathtub, Wendy Big Toe, Jim Cow Dung, Parker Red Nose, John Doorknob. After selection, the 5 of you will be given the opportunity to work in the castle. After 3 consecutive days of training, Butler Carter finally announced the 3 men and 2 women who met his criteria to be the castle's new serving men and maids. The remaining 7 or 8 trainees asked unwillingly, "Mr. Carter, please give me another chance, I will definitely do better." "I'm sorry, once the decision is made, it cannot be changed. But you don't have to be nervous, during these 3 days of training, each of you will be paid 3 copper coins according to the standard of a kitchen maid. And your excellence has already been engraved in my mind, if the castle needs to recruit servants next time, I will definitely consider you first." Strictly speaking, the castle's servants were owned by Liszt. But it wasn't like he was driving the servants for free, he still had to pay for them. The servants could save their own money, buy food, drink, and clothes, and also send it home. The castle's salary was 1 copper coin a day for the kitchen maid and assistant serving men, 2 copper coins a day for the maid and serving men, 3 copper coins a day for the first serving men and cook, and 4 copper coins a day for the butler and the housekeeper. Except for Carter and Mawson, the other servants in the castle chose to send money home to supplement their family expenses. Moreover, once the servants got tired of working, they could apply for a buyout, which was to return to freedom. Of course, the decision was in the hands of the nobles whether to agree to the buyout or not. The young men and women who were screened out left the castle in disappointment. For them, losing the opportunity to work in the beautiful castle was a major blow. The 5 who were chosen couldn't contain their excitement. "Heavens, I've been chosen. Did I stay in the castle? Mom, I did it." Carter smiled as he looked at the 5 newcomers, recalling his youth. From a poor serf family, he was chosen by the castle of a viscount family and became a servant. Starting from the lowest assistant serving man, he gradually became an excellent servant, and the Tulip family also ushered in leaps and bounds. He was sent by the count to manage the family's other castles in other towns. When Liszt came of age, he followed him and became a housekeeper. Time had left heavy traces on his face. He could barely remember how happy he was when he became a servant. For the past few decades, he had been working in the castle. His relatives had passed away many years ago. There were regrets, but there were also blessings. Now, her greatest wish was to be by List's side. When the day came that the sun no longer rose, she would choose to sleep forever. "Young ladies and gentlemen, please be quiet." He stretched out his hand and gestured for the newcomers to not be too excited. "Next, I will announce your job positions." Lily and the others quickly quietened down. "Lily Bathtub, Mrs. Abby admires you very much. You work as a kitchen maid. Ms. Irene will take you to familiarize you for a while and help Mrs. Abby as soon as possible." Little Lily immediately nodded like a chick pecking at rice. "I will familiarize myself with the kitchen as soon as possible." "That's good. But don't put too much pressure on yourself. Mrs. Abby is outspoken, but once you get familiar with her, you will know that she is a good person." Carter was a little worried for the little girl. He didn't know if she could bear Abby Ladle's loud voice and hairdryer. He continued to announce, "Wendy Big Toe, Mrs. Morrison will take you to familiarize yourself with what a maid needs to do." "Yes, Mr. Carter." Then, Jim Cow Dung, Parker Red Nose, and John Doorknob. Carter looked at the three young men with emaciated faces. "Mr. Carter." The three straightened their chests, trying to make themselves look elegant. Carter was satisfied with their attitude. Compared with a thorn like Thomas, the obedient young men were more in line with his wishes. "In the next few days, I will take you to familiarize yourself with the work of a servant as soon as possible. Soon, you will be busy, not only in the castle, but also outside the castle." He looked up at each new servant. "You are not only yourselves, but also the image of the castle. You must dress appropriately and behave in a civilized manner. You must become familiar with aristocratic etiquette as soon as possible. You must completely say goodbye to the lazy appearance of the serfs in the past. Do you understand, ladies and gentlemen?" "Understood, Mr. Carter." "Then, each of you will have half a day off. Go back and share the good news with your families. Starting tomorrow, you will live in the castle. Mr. Carter, congratulations, you are about to become a butler." After the new servants impatiently returned home to report the good news, Mrs. Morrison chatted with Carter. "Well, this feeling is good." Carter showed a rare playful smile. "I have to live a little longer to prevent Thomas from taking over. I don't want to see him enjoy this feeling. I think Thomas is more willing to stay by Master's side. He is indeed smarter than Tom and Jesse." Carter said with a hint of mystery, "Master inherited the courage of the Tulip family and the shrewdness of the Taro family. Sometimes, being a little stupid in front of Master might be better than being a little smarter." At this point, he suddenly listened attentively and then said, "The sound of hooves, Master has returned. I am going to greet Master." "Go ahead, the stupid and smart butler Carter." Carter tilted his neck. He had already formed a tacit understanding with Mo Senator. Only two butlers with tacit understanding could take care of the castle in an orderly manner. Walking to the door, the tall and handsome List riding on the back of Fire Dragon galloped over with the sun on his back. The golden light sprinkled on his light blonde slightly curly hair, as if countless gold were flowing. Master is like a natural aristocrat. He has all the temperament of an aristocrat. Carter thought. He bowed slightly. "Welcome home, Master." "Mr. Carter, have you chosen a new servant?" List handed the reins to Thomas and untied the bow tie around his neck. Summer was coming, and the aristocratic clothes were a little stuffy. He didn't like this kind of attire. The aristocratic clothes of the Grand Duchy were the style of the continent. Female aristocrats mainly wore long skirts with a skirt inside and cushions on their buttocks, so that the whole long skirt could be supported like a pyramid. Li Weiwei never wore this kind of clothes. She liked to wear male aristocratic clothes. The full set of male aristocratic clothes was called frac abbey. It consisted of a coat shaped like a tuxedo, frac, a small vest worn inside, killet, and a pair of tight trousers, bottette. Of course, it also had to be paired with boots and stockings. Another thing was that male aristocrats needed to be adorned with clothing that symbolized aristocratic authority around their necks. Bow ties could be worn at ordinary home. When going out for business, they needed to wear a neck-like cravat, which Liszt called a neckerchief. During grand ceremonies, they needed to wear raff, which was a large disc around the neck, which Liszt called a pleated collar. Chapter 48. Ties, shirts, vests, boxers, suits, trousers, gentlemen's hats, leather shoes. Liszt had a series of clothes he wanted to produce. But he couldn't be so unconventional. After all, he was just a country baron. If one day he became the king of a country, he could reform at will and lead the trend. Now he could only endure the cumbersome clothing to maintain the so-called aristocratic decency. "Master, I gave the servants half a day off. Starting tomorrow, they will work wholeheartedly for the castle." "Well, you see to it." "Yes." Liszt, who was sweating from the heat, had little interest in chatting. "Mr. Carter, have someone prepare bathing water for me. This weather is not very friendly to people." "As you wish." Carter hurriedly told the maids to prepare bathing water. Nowadays, the small castle always had bathing water, because the servants knew that their master was an aristocrat who was extremely fond of cleanliness. It was normal for him to wash once a day, twice a day, or 3 times a day. But it was abnormal not to wash for a day. After taking a bath, he changed into a loose robe. This robe was a kind of pajamas. The aristocrats here also knew that it was uncomfortable to always wear tight formal clothes, so they changed the pajamas into home clothes. Liszt still felt that it was cumbersome and uncomfortable to wear. In the summer, he liked half-sleeved shirts and t-shirts the most, so he rolled up the sleeves of the robe, revealing half of his arms. Although this was not in line with aristocratic etiquette, in the small castle, who would dare to pursue his small transgression? The countryside also had its advantages. "Master, unfortunately, we don't have ice, otherwise I could brew you a cup of crystal sugar water to dispel the heat. Even in Tulip Castle, there is not much ice to squander in the summer. I can bear this difficulty, but unfortunately, I can no longer drink cold beer." He did not like to drink. Now he drank at banquets because his predecessor loved alcohol and needed to socialize. But he only liked to drink cold beer in the summer, which was cool and bright. Midsummer was approaching, and it was getting hotter day by day. In his memory, the hottest time on Coral Island was when eggs were cooked on the ground. It was estimated to be 40 degrees Celsius. Every year, many serfs would die of heat. I heard that saltpeter can be used to make ice. However, saltpeter is difficult to obtain. It seems that there are no saltpeter mines on the Coral Island, and even if there were, I wouldn't be able to recognize them. I remember reading that the earthen corners, stables, and toilet corners in the countryside are rich in saltpeter. However, the flower town only has wooden houses and no toilets. Basically, Liszt could not replicate the technology of making ice with saltpeter. Like the other nobles, he could only hide the ice in the icehouse during the winter and move it out during the summer. "Mr. Carter, don't forget to remind me to build an icehouse this winter." "Yes, master." Dinner. As usual, Gort, Marcus, Isaiah, and Blair were invited. In the flower town, only these 4 people were qualified to eat at the same table as Liszt. "Liszt, the planning for the oyster settlement has been completed. Tomorrow, the first batch of oyster settlement fishermen will wear the new equipment you have prepared for them and head to the east coast to officially fish. They are all old people, women, and children. They are stupid and impulsive. For the past 2 days, they have been picking shells on the seashore. When the news of the Lord personally hosting a seafood banquet spread, the commoners followed suit and prepared to go fishing for seafood to eat. They always followed the actions of the Lord. List said solemnly, "Teacher Gort, you must properly guide the safety. I don't want any commoners to be in danger because of eating seafood. As the town's officials, you must pay attention to this idea. The population is the most important productivity of the flower town." They might still be inwardly disapproving. However, Gort and the others, who already understood List's attitude, still nodded without hesitation, expressing their understanding. "Then tomorrow, if you have time, come with me to the oyster settlement to see the effect of the fishermen's first beachcombing. At the same time, you must actively publicize every kind of seafood that can and cannot be caught. In addition, you must also teach them how to preserve the seafood." "Sir Baron, we have already organized the clerks to repeatedly emphasize this point. Moreover, the clerks have also tasted the seafood in the castle. They are very enthusiastic about this." "Very good." The next day, after calculating the time of low tide, List arrived at the oyster settlement with the retainer knight. The oyster settlement had yet to start building houses. Just a piece of wasteland not far from the seashore had been leveled. In the future, wooden houses would be built. At this time, there were about 200 old, weak, women, and children carrying baskets or wooden buckets on the east coast's flat beach, constantly rummaging through every rock and shoveling every piece of sand. Many of them still didn't have gloves, shovels, hammers, and other tools. They had to rely entirely on their hands. The output of the town's tailors and blacksmiths could not keep up. "Sir Lord." After seeing List, the fisherman saluted. List nodded slightly in response to the fisherman. Riding Fire Dragon, he strolled around. Beachcombing was very tiring, being exposed to the wind, the sun, and the blisters. However, the workload was not very heavy. Therefore, the fishermen, who had always felt like idling, were now very enthusiastic. Whether they had experience or not, they were very busy. After watching for a while, List felt unbearably hot. He hurriedly hid under the coconut tree. He raised his head and looked at the tall coconut tree, feeling that something was not quite right. After a long while, he understood, there are no coconuts. Thereupon, he turned around and asked the clerk beside him, "Does this tree not bear fruit?" "It bears fruit. Sir Lord, this is a fragrant coconut tree. Its fruits are called fragrant coconuts. However, when the fruits are very small, they are picked by the monkeys of the thorn's ridge." "Monkeys?" "They are a kind of grayish-yellow monkeys. We call them fruit-stealing monkeys. They are very fierce. Sometimes, they will go to the farmlands in groups to destroy the crops." "Fruit-stealing monkeys." List nodded, not saying anything. He suddenly recalled the news he had seen. It seemed that in some Southeast Asian countries, there was a tradition of training monkeys to pick coconuts. Coconut trees were very tall, making it very difficult for humans to climb them. However, monkeys could freely pick coconuts from the trees. If the town also trained a group of fruit-stealing monkeys, they might be able to develop a coconut business. Of course, he was still not sure whether this fragrant coconut tree was a real coconut tree or not. In winter, the flower town was covered in snow for more than 2 months. If it was a real coconut tree, it would have already frozen to death. "How does the fragrant coconut taste?" "Once, I picked up a fragrant coconut that was dropped by a fruit-stealing monkey. It had a lot of milk-like juice inside. It tasted sweet and sour, very delicious." List's appetite was aroused. There were many such fragrant coconut trees on the east coast. If they could be protected, he should be able to harvest a lot of fragrant coconuts. It could be regarded as a kind of beverage, and could even be developed into a specialty. He cast his gaze towards the Thorns Ridge in the distance. "Sooner or later, I will take down the Thorns Ridge and eliminate all threats to the flower town." Chapter 49. If World of Warcraft could be trained, then a few monkeys could naturally be trained as well. For a knight who possessed chi, beasts were no different from kittens and puppies. However, there were currently only 5 people in the Flower Town who possessed chi: List, Marcus, Gort, Isaiah, and Blair. Each of them had their own duties, so it was impossible for them to become beast tamers. It seems that it is time to select a few strong youngsters from the town's commoners, teach them chi, and become my retainer knight. As long as he could afford to raise a retainer knight, List could even form an orders of chivalry. However, due to the castle's financial and material limitations, he could at most raise a dozen retainer knight and form a squad of knight. This was his plan. The greatest use of the knight squad was to clean up the Thorns Ridge's World of Warcraft. The Thorns Ridge would be incorporated into the Flower Town and become his territory. Once the Oyster Settlement's food supply stabilizes and the castle's tax revenue stabilizes, then immediately train the retainer knight. Karl Hammerstein's 4 retainer knights did not possess chi, their potential was already wasted, and they were not worth nurturing. The new retainer knight had to be nurtured from youngsters to cultivate chi and become a true knight. He was enjoying the shade and thinking about the development plan. Gort, who was next to him, could not help but wipe his sweat with a handkerchief. He had to wear a neat aristocratic 3-piece suit every day, so he was extremely hot. List, the fishermen have finished their inspection and everything is going smoothly. Should we go back? List was also very hot. This weather was really not a good time to go out. He nodded. All right, let's go back. He was not a spoiled person, but if he could enjoy it, then why should he feel wronged? As a lord, he had the power to kill in his fief. There was no need to show off the qualities of being close to the people and dedicated. Bloodline and chi were the foundation of aristocracy. On the way back, List inspected the construction of the settlement's roads. There was a lot of sand, but transporting it was rather difficult. Commoners could only use buckets and basins to transport the sand, which was not very efficient. But no matter what, the road was taking shape. Just as he passed by the flower farm, a stench suddenly floated over from afar. It drilled into List's nose and almost made him vomit. The flaming dragon horse beneath him was also sneezing non-stop, looking like it couldn't take it anymore. Ah, it's too smelly. What's this smell? Who made that weird smell? Several retainer knight also covered their noses, wishing they could puke on the spot. Who's cleaning their toilet? List recalled the fragrant smell of dung he picked up in the countryside when he was a child. At this time, the smell was even stronger, but he quickly responded, there are no toilets in the Flower Town, nor are there any septic tanks. The dung I picked up shouldn't have such a smell. He pinched his nose and said to the retainer knight, Karl, the 4 of you go investigate where the smell is coming from. After a while, Karl returned with a blade of grass in his hand. Sir, the reason has been found. He raised the blade of grass in his hand. It's this blade of grass. A few children on the farm were messing around and pulled out a lot of this blade of grass from a wasteland. Who knew that this blade of grass would emit such a disgusting stench? While speaking, an even stronger stench drilled into List's nose. The source was the blade of grass in Karl's hand. List endured the stench, but his eyes were shining. Is this blade of grass very large? Yes. Good, very good. Karl, immediately notify Gort to protect this blade of grass. Do not allow anyone to approach it, let alone harm it. Although puzzled, the retainer knight still obeyed the order. After giving the order, List was in a great mood. The valet Thomas couldn't help but ask, Master, why do you feel happy about such a smelly blade of grass? You don't understand. This blade of grass is very useful. He returned to the castle. While taking a cold bath, he checked the smoke serpentines, wanting to see if the mission had been updated. He originally believed that he would have to change all the fishermen's equipment before the mission could be considered completed. But now, the mission reward of a large blade of smoke grass had already been obtained, indicating that the mission had been completed. Sure enough, after the smoke came out, the serpentines updated, mission completed. Reward, a large blade of smoke grass. After a short moment, the smoke serpentines had already changed into, mission, the newly reclaimed corn field has already been sown. The corn worm is impatient to breathe fresh air. It is a brave little fellow. Please help the corn worm settle down its worm stalk. Reward, a forgotten secret chi skill. A forgotten secret chi skill? It's not a secret chi skill, but a secret skill. Does this mean that the reward is only a big move? List guessed. The secret skill contained the method to refine and use chi, as well as many kinds of chi moves. Secret chi skills were relatively more powerful moves. They were somewhat similar to the ultimate profoundness of secret chi skills and could be understood as big moves. However, because of the cryptic and hidden inheritance, as well as the great difficulty in learning them, it was very difficult for small aristocrats to pass down secret skills from generation to generation. The Tulip family didn't have secret skills passed down. The Red Crab Island Marquis family also didn't have any since their rise. Only an old Marquis family could possibly have a secret skill or two. But it was undeniable that the value of a secret skill was enormous. Ultimate profoundness was the strongest move of every secret chi skill, but it was limited to mid-grade and high-grade secret skills. The power of ultimate profoundness was naturally limited. Secret skills were different. The stronger the chi, the more powerful they would be. List was very satisfied. Not bad, not bad. Although I don't like fighting and killing, having a secret skill can greatly increase my battle strength and reduce the possibility of encountering danger. I just don't know what kind of secret chi skill it will be. However, I'll know in a moment. So far, the smoke mission didn't have any super difficult content. It was basically the daily work that List was supposed to do. This time was the same. The corn fields had been reclaimed in order to settle down the corn worms. Whether there was a mission or not, List would do it. Soon after, he thought of another question: will this mission be a chain mission of the Invisible Dragon series? 3 days later, the oyster settlement's fishermen could steadily gather seafood at the sea, harvesting a large amount of seafood every time. A portion of the seafood quickly entered the commoners' dining tables, replacing the fishermen's need for bread and minimizing the town's grain consumption. But there was no place to store more seafood. List, we have to think of a way. There is too much seafood on the east coast. The fishermen can't finish the seafood they catch, and it could go bad at any time. Gort found List and began to worry. In this regard, List was quite speechless. Since it can't be finished, then we have to think of a way to turn the seafood into dried goods and preserve it. Now is not a good season to make dried goods. Summer and autumn are more suitable. Before the dried goods season, then we should stop fishing. The seafood won't disappear from the sea. Without a cold storage and a sufficient amount of salt to preserve it, dried goods were the best way to store it. Now that the weather was too hot, dried goods could easily go bad. Therefore, it was better to catch less seafood and catch as much as there was to eat. This way, there wouldn't be excessive fishing in the sea. After saying that, List's tone was a bit stern, expressing his dissatisfaction. Teacher Gort, I am the Lord and you are an official. I need you to govern the flower town for me instead of looking for the Lord whenever something happens, understand? Chapter 50. The oyster settlement's wooden houses had yet to be built, but the fishermen's fishing was progressing smoothly. The construction of roads in the settlements and the town was not fast, but they were being laid every day. The dairy farm's low-yielding and low-nutritious two-leaf grass had been completely eradicated and replaced with high-yielding and high-nutritious alfalfa. The 10 cows were very fond of the new grass, and their milk production had increased by a lot. The alfalfa in the horse farm outside the castle had also begun to flourish. Only, there were no pregnant mares and black dragon had yet to enter the estrus period. The peanut settlement's peanuts were growing well. The peanuts near the peanut worm stalk were about to be harvested. It was estimated that 2 batches of peanuts a year would not be a problem. The flower farm's black tulip had already begun to bear fruit. It was a kind of small capsule, dried fruit, but it had yet to split open. Once it split open, there would be many flaky seeds, which could be propagated in large quantities. With the influence of the tulip worm's worm stalk, the black tulip had more than 30 fruits. It was estimated that it could propagate several mu of land in one go. Then, it would be handed over to the tulip castle's greater sprite Xiangxiang to continue propagating it. In less than half a year, it could be planted on a large scale. If it was an ordinary farming method, it might not be able to reach such a scale even after several years. This was the ability of sprites. However, sprites were a powerful aid, but they were also a kind of restriction. They restricted humans from cultivating plants and researching fertilizers. Even now, they still adopted the primitive slash-and-burn method. Liszt was changing the flower town's agricultural method. Each settlement had begun to popularize the composting of manure, plant ash, and pond mud. The wheat settlement still continued to grow wheat. With the help of the wheat worm stalk, it was possible to increase the wheat yield by 20 to 30%. At the same time, the 3 stalks of corn grass were also taken care of by special people. However, the majority of the corn grass was cultivated by the barley settlement serfs, who gathered forage seeds on their behalf. The barley settlement had previously mainly grown barley and oats. The most recent corn field was the wasteland reclaimed in the barley settlement. Coupled with the cultivation of corn grass, there was a serious shortage of serfs. The mushroom settlement and the tomato settlement were still at their original scale, without much change. The town had the biggest change. There was no more dirty manure, and no one dared to litter the streets. This was enforced by Liszt. There were patrol teams patrolling every day, and anyone who dared to litter would face a severe whipping. The nobles punished commoners with all kinds of tortures, but Liszt selectively preserved them. At first, Liszt thought of using the police station's method of public security detention, but later he thought that only detention without corporal punishment was simply a happy life for the serfs. He didn't have to work, and he could eat and drink for free every day. Therefore, physical punishment was unavoidable. I have already divided 50 acres of wasteland to plant corn. This is the limit of the corn worm's influence. Right now, the barley settlement is no longer able to meet the needs of the planting, and it is also very difficult to transfer serfs from other settlements. The oyster settlement has already transferred a group of serfs, so for the time being, there are only 10 mu of corn fields. Gord explained to Liszt. Today, they were here to settle down the corn worms. The corn had already sprouted. A layer of lush green covered 10 acres of newly cultivated wasteland that had been fertilized. So be it. After the oats and barley are harvested, we'll switch to corn. Without sprite worms, barley and oats are not cost-effective. Liszt nodded. Immediately after, he began to settle down the corn worm stalk. The corn worm's worm stalk was yellow corn, so its color was bright yellow. It was very beautiful and dazzling. Little guy, come and take a breath of fresh air. The corn worm was indeed a brave little guy. It crawled out of the jade box, opened its mouth, and spat out the worm stalk, which was planted in the middle of the field. The worm stalk quickly faced the wind and grew into a stalk of yellow corn covered in grains. At this point, the new mission was completed. Of the 6 sprite worms, 5 were settled down, leaving only the thorn sprite worm. Liszt was in a good mood. While riding on the horse, he began to concentrate. The smoke serpentines quickly twisted before his eyes. Mission completed, reward Chi secret skill magic eyes. Immediately after, the content changed, and a new mission was issued. Mission: all of your companions have been properly settled down. Only the thorn sprite worm does not have a new home. As the Lord, you cannot waste the productivity of any sprite worm. Please settle down the thorn sprite worm's worm stalk. Reward, the invasion of the invisible dragon. As he skimmed through the contents of the new mission, his complacent mood quickly shattered. Were it not for the retainers and servants following him, he would have stomped his feet and cursed, "Smoke mission, are you kidding me?" The invasion of the invisible dragon can also be regarded as a reward. According to the information previously obtained, the invisible dragon might leave behind a priceless space ring. However, one had to be alive to obtain it. A dragon could easily destroy a town. List did not want to test whether he could send the invisible dragon away with 2 old cows and a bundle of smoke grass. In his opinion, the more capable one was, the better one would be. If he were the lord of the Coral Island, then even if he had to lose a town, he would still give the invisible dragon a try. However, there was only the flower town. If the dragon rolled around, then the town would probably be gone and he would become a destitute person, let alone a luxurious aristocratic life. In a split second, he even decided to give up on the thorn sprite worm and never complete the mission to trigger the invasion of the invisible dragon as a reward. However, after calming down, he was not willing. The smoke mission seemed to be just pushing the boat with the current, pushing things that should have existed to him. However, if he did not push the boat with the current, then who knew how much more difficult it would be for him to develop. Moreover, he already could not do without the quick benefits brought by the smoke mission. Every time he completed a mission, he would get a reward, which felt wonderful. After struggling all the way to the castle, he made up his mind. Let's do it, isn't it just the invisible dragon? Prepare the smoke grass and the cows. At worst, if the flower town is destroyed, then I will go to Tulip Castle and shamelessly ask for a share of the family property. The count wouldn't want to see his son starve to death. For the sake of the space ring, and even more for the smoke mission, List threw caution to the wind. After making up his mind, the next step was to make adequate preparations. For this reason, he spent the night in the castle's study, lighting a lamp and staying up late to design a plan. He did not let anyone participate. It was good that he alone held the secret of the invisible dragon. If he obtained the space ring, then there was the risk that the secret would be leaked and the divine artifact would be snatched away. The space ring was worthy of being called a divine artifact. Before considering victory, first consider defeat. The most important thing is to preserve one's life. This was the core idea of List's design plan. Regardless of whether things would succeed or not, the first thing to do was to ensure his own safety without any worries. He looked at the sketch of the flower town he drew. After thinking for a long time, he circled the dairy farm. This will be the battlefield for the invasion of the invisible dragon. The cows will be left as bait. Then, all the smoke grass will be cut and piled on the dairy farm to attract the invisible dragon's attention. As for fighting, it is impossible. No one can defeat a dragon, let alone kill an invisible dragon. It is said that dragons have dragon breath. It sprays special magic substances such as flames, acids, venom, and the like from their mouths. Half of a dragon's fighting strength relies on dragon breath. Therefore, the surface is very dangerous. It is necessary to dig underground so that one can escape from the invisible dragon. A dragon would never dig the ground and catch a few insects like humans, right? Then, I probably cannot see the invisible dragon, and the flower town should also not be able to see the invisible dragon. In order to ensure the invisible dragon's true position, I should sprinkle a layer of flour on the dairy farm so that when the invisible dragon walks, it will leave its footprints. But then again, do dragons need to walk? Don't they fly? List scratched his head, thinking about how to find the invisible dragon. However, no matter how he thought about it, he still could not figure out how to see a dragon that could become invisible. Irritated, he slammed his fist on the table. Clatter. Chapter 51. After a lot of effort, the flames were extinguished, but the night novel had already been burnt to a crisp. This was a night novel called Vulture Night Stephanie's Expedition. Strictly speaking, it was more like an autobiographical history book. It was about a sky knight Stephanie Vulture who could soar in the sky riding a World of Warcraft dragon vulture. He opened up new territory for the Blast Furnace Kingdom. The story was very boring, but the content was very detailed. Among all the fabricated night novels, this one could be called a clear stream. Liszt had read it 3 times and felt that the story was most likely true. Even the Vulture family might still exist in the Blast Furnace Kingdom. What a pity, such a good book. I wonder if I can get a new one when I go to Tulip Castle next time. Holding the burnt novel, Liszt felt regret. Good books were hard to find. Suddenly, he raised his eyebrows and saw the burnt cover peeling off, revealing a corner of the golden color. It seemed that the cover had a layer. With a flick of his finger, the cover cracked and fell off, revealing the golden color inside. It really is a layer. Liszt's disappointment was replaced by surprise. This should be the so-called forgotten Do Chi's secret skill. The wheat worm mission was completed during the day, and the mission reward was delivered at night. Everything was so natural. The cover was completely rubbed off, revealing a golden paper about the size of a palm. It was not real paper. After Liszt studied it, he found that it was made of gold, similar to tinfoil. On it, there were a lot of small characters and a diagram of the human body's qi circulation, which was engraved with a relief technique. Magic Eye Chi's secret skill, Stephanie Vulture. At the top of the golden paper, a line of slightly larger serpentines was written. Sure enough, it's a Do Chi's secret skill, Magic Eye, the inherited secret skill of the Vulture family. It seems that this novel I obtained is extraordinary. It might very well be a unique one. The weight of this golden paper is equivalent to that of a gold coin. I don't think there's such a piece in every book. After saying that, he looked away from the golden paper and stared at the bookshelf in the study. These books contain information about the invisible dragon and Magic Eye. Is there something else hidden in them? In order to verify his idea, he used a knife to make a cut on the cover of each novel. But he did not find any layer. Obviously, there was only one Chi's secret skill. Magic Eye. The content is very complicated, and the Chi circulation involved is quite detailed and cumbersome. It is much more complicated than the ultimate Chi secrets. It is a bit difficult to learn. Liszt felt that his understanding was not bad. He learned of Fire Dragon Drill and Fire Surge quickly and was about to master them. He also planned to follow Marcus to learn his archery skills. He preferred long-range attacks of his own. Should I postpone learning this Magic Eye? As soon as he thought of this, he saw the introduction of Magic Eye at the end of the golden paper and directly rejected it. The introduction said, the Magic Eye can directly see through the operation of magic. Even a great mage's invisibility cannot hide their figure under the Magic Eye. In a flash, he understood that this Chi's secret skill was still part of the chain mission, and it existed for the sake of the invisible dragon. Is this telling me that I can see the invisible dragon after learning the Magic Eyes? Therefore, what Liszt had to do next was already clear. He first repeatedly tested the smell of the smoke grass and found that the smell of the juice from the grass was quite pungent, but it was not as strong as the smell of the smoke grass when it was burned. He had people cut a batch of smoke grass to dry and built a beacon tower on the dairy farm, specifically preparing to burn the smoke grass to attract the invisible dragon. Under the beacon tower, he began to dig an underground passage for hiding. At the same time, cows would be tied around the beacon tower. Before the invisible dragon invaded, the cows would be smeared with smoke grass juice. On a slope a little further away from the beacon tower, Liszt also had people dig a tunnel. The entrance to the tunnel was camouflaged with a bunker. According to his plan, he would hide here and constantly supervise the invasion of the invisible dragon. After seeing the invisible dragon, he had his servants light the smoke grass on the beacon tower, and then the servants went into the underground passage to hide. He watched the invisible dragon eat and drink to its heart's content until it flew away. Then, he rummaged the ground to see if the invisible dragon would drop its gem. Standing on the slope where the tunnel was being dug, List was still pondering in his mind, lest he missed anything. If the mission is really completed, then the reward will be issued. This means that after I set up the thorn sprite worm, the invisible dragon will come to the flower town. Is it the smoke mission that controls the invisible dragon, or is it a coincidence that the mission guides it? I can try to set up the thorn sprite worm at any time, and the invisible dragon will also invade the flower town at any time? It was very mysterious. For the time being, there was no answer. What he had to do was to strive to complete every smoke mission and strengthen himself. List, digging from here to the Thorns Forest is not a simple task. I still don't know why you are doing this. Gort directed the commoners to dig the tunnel according to List's instructions. You don't need to know, Teacher Gort. It is not that I don't trust you, but rather, it is a secret of mine. You just need to move all the dairy farm's farmers to another place for a day on the day I notify you. Alright, the flower town is your territory. No one can go against your will. Of course, I will do as you say. That's good. So, do you really want to set up the thorn sprite worm in the Thorns Forest? The forest is not large and is not a good location. I have my reasons. Oh, it doesn't matter. In any case, the thorn sprite worm is a useless sprite worm and will not affect the development of agriculture. Every sprite worm has a unique function, it is just that we have yet to discover it. Perhaps, one day, you will discover that the thorns will also give birth to magic ingredients. I hope so. The project went on like fire. No one understood why List wanted to do this, but no one dared to resist. In the flower town, basically no one dared to stop List from doing what he wanted, including murder and arson. The tunnel was dug one day at a time. He began to practice the magic eyes secret technique in the castle. This Chi's secret technique was very complicated, but with his comprehension, he quickly found the knack of it. To put it bluntly, it was to use the eyes as a bridge to allow his Chi to resonate with the magic power of the outside world. Magic power was a quite magical force that emitted fluctuations all the time. He preferred to call these fluctuations the radiation emitted by magic power. Receiving radiation and using the eyes as a radar, this was the principle of the magic eyes, a non-combat secret technique. After studying for 5 days in a row, List finally completed the final Chi operation technique and cast the magic eyes for the first time. At that moment, looking at his own eyes in the mirror, the sapphire blue pupils seemed to be rotating. Countless stars flowed in the rotating pupils, mysterious and profound. Bewitching and beautiful. My eyes can charm any girl to death, right? He cast his gaze outside the window. Marcus was teaching Chi to the 4 retainer knight retainer. They were already past their prime, but with diligent training, it was still possible to extract Chi. At this time, Marcus in his field of vision was like a cyan figure. Not far away, Dosen, who was competing with a stone, was a faint yellow figure. Chapter 52. The magic eyes consumed a lot of Chi. List found that he could only maintain it for 5 minutes. Not only would his Chi not be able to keep up, but his eyes would also become sore. However, whenever the Chi in his body was exhausted, the red blood sword worn at his waist would send a warm aura to make up for the loss of Chi. The ruby produced by the dragon contained magical power. When he condensed the magic eyes, he could see the ruby glowing with a blood-like light, like a whirlpool, slightly rotating. I can see the magic of the gem, so I should be able to see the magic of the dragon. During this time, I should practice hard and try to cast the magic eyes at will. Pulling out the red blood sword, List was in high spirits. Next, it was time to prepare for the dragon slaying. Gort, what do you think Sir Baron means? Why is he digging an underground passage here? Isaiah counted on his fingers, calculating how many copper coins to be distributed to the serfs. Liszt never drove the serfs for free and always paid them a certain amount of money. Therefore, the serfs were eager to sign up for various kinds of production and construction. Driven by interests and the authority of the Lord, everything went smoothly. To be honest, I'm confused. Gort held the pipe in his mouth, looking as if it had nothing to do with him. Liszt is already an adult. He is no longer the timid youngster from the Tulip Castle. Most of the time, I cannot understand what he is thinking. I don't know what he will do to Flower Town. That's not what you said in the letter. You said that Flower Town is thriving. If I didn't say that, would you have come? Besides, Flower Town is thriving now. At least we have seafood to eat every day, don't we? I admit that catching seafood is a pioneer, and picking up feces is also a major move. But what are we doing today? Digging an underground passage under the farm. Are we going to store the pasture in the cellar? Gort took off his pipe and shook off the ash. Don't complain. Blair never complains, so every dinner, Liszt drinks an extra cup with him. That's because he's already old. He just wants to find a noble backer and spend his remaining years in peace. He doesn't have any ambition. You're not young anymore. But I hope that one day, I can return to the ranks of nobles. I must fight for my son. He is too stupid and will never be able to marry a noble lady. Isaiah scratched his head in distress. I originally wanted to come here to see if I could get a chance to go to the battlefield. You said that Liszt has great ambitions. I'm not sure, but you can talk to Marcus. That guy used to want to be a noble more than anyone else, but he quickly pledged his loyalty to Liszt. Isaiah narrowed his eyes. I will. Soon it was evening and the distribution of wages began. Isaiah checked the roster and distributed copper coins to the serfs one by one. Next, a leave a dog's hit. Sir, it's me. It's me. Alewa, whose surname was Dog Shit, rubbed his palms and happily received the 2 copper coins from the clerk. He could buy 8 large loaves of black bread. However, he didn't intend to buy black bread. His wife had already joined the oyster settlement and went out to sea every day to catch seafood. In addition to the portion handed over to the castle, they could also eat seafood at home. After eating a lot of seafood these days, he felt that his body was full of strength. At night, his endurance doubled, reaching more than 6 seconds. His wife praised him for his ability and told him to eat more seafood. He was going to have a 3rd child. Now that he earned more copper coins, he could send his child to the blacksmith shop as an apprentice in the future. The Sir Lord had said that serfs with a skill would be put in an important position. Praise be to Sir Lord. After putting away the copper coins, Alewa couldn't help but pray in his heart. He liked his current lord because his days were getting better day by day. He didn't have to worry about not having enough to eat and could even save up copper coins. I just don't know, why did Sir Lord dig a hole here? He was a serf of the dairy farm and was in charge of raising cows. Before, he was still worried and complained to his wife that he might lose his job. Sir Lord might not want to raise cows anymore, otherwise why would he dig a hole in the dairy farm? But his wife fiercely scolded him, if you don't raise cows, you can raise horses. If you don't raise horses, you can build roads. If you don't build roads, you can grow corn. Sir Lord is a great person, allowing the elderly, women, and children to work easily and eat their fill. Bullshit, stop your complaints, you must believe in Sir Lord. Alewa was obedient to his wife, so he quickly changed his mind. He felt that no matter where Sir Lord dug a hole, he was still a great lord. As for why he dug a hole, it didn't matter. How could a commoner understand the thoughts of a noble lord? Practicing magic eyes and supervising the construction of the project became Liszt's main work these days. After a few days, all the preparations for the dairy farm had been completed. The beacon tower was ready, the bunker was camouflaged, and the passage was repeatedly passed without any obstacles. The smoke grass was harvested and stacked on the beacon tower, ready to be lit at any time. The young cows were raised not far away, while the two old cows, Old Flower and Old Black, were tied to the edge of the beacon tower. List also walked the road from the Thorns Woods to the bunker several times to ensure that he could immediately rush to the bunker after placing the cordyceps. The bunker had a U-shaped passage that connected to another refuge. If the invisible dragon didn't eat the cows and grass as expected and fly away from the flower town, he would immediately hide in the refuge through the U-shaped passage and then block the passage. The refuge's breathing holes were connected to the outside world, and a lot of food and drink items were stored there. At the very least, his life could be guaranteed. When dealing with a dragon, he didn't dare to be careless. Walking through the dairy farm, List inspected the quality of the project for the last time. It wasn't a big project, so the progress was fast and the quality was good. Moreover, it was built according to his wishes without any perfunctory measures. I like this world, this era. He climbed the beacon tower and overlooked the entire dairy farm. Everyone has to be busy with a word from the Lord. Previously, when I was managing a 5-person team in the company, there were still thorns that opposed me. Here, no one dares to question my words, not even Gort or Marcus. For men, power was an irresistible desire. A person who had never enjoyed power might not feel that it was wonderful. But after enjoying power, it would become addictive and irresistible. List could no longer give up his identity as the Baron of the Flower Town. At the same time, the ambition at the bottom of his heart continued to grow. The Flower Town was still too small to satisfy his desire for greater power. Fortunately, ambition was just ambition. Reason dominated his thoughts. Based on the policy of accumulate grain widely, build high walls, and slowly claim kingship, he slowly planned. Chapter 53. In early June, the weather was dry. When the sun rose in the morning, the coolness was swept away and replaced by a heat that would last all day. Dressed in a black World of Warcraft leather armor with the jeweled red blood sword hanging at his waist, his sapphire eyes were in high spirits, and his handsome face had a solemn expression. Gort, who got up early and came to the castle to listen to orders, looked at the Lord of Flower Town in front of him and was momentarily absent-minded. Even the Earl of Coral Island did not have the soul-stirring aristocratic temperament of List at this time. In terms of appearance, out of 100 points, List could get 99 points. 1 point less was out of fear that he would become too arrogant. Being handsome could not be eaten, but it could make one happy. Every morning when he got up and looked in the mirror, List would be in a good mood. The valet Thomas carefully helped List tidy up the creases on his leather armor. The main duty of a valet was to maintain an aristocratic appearance. Teacher Gort, according to the original plan, moved the dairy farm's farmers to other settlements and implement a full day of lockdown. All fiefs residents are not allowed to leave their homes for any reason. The patrols are to suspend their patrols and wait in the administrative office for my order to lift the lockdown. Understood, List, I will give the order. Gort turned around and rode out. Everyone in the fief was confused about the Lord's decision, but obedience was already deep in their bones. After the order was issued, the entire Flower Town quickly quieted down. It was as quiet as a deep sleep at night, with only a few barks occasionally heard. After all, there were not many people who could afford to keep dogs, so this little bit of noise was irrelevant. The sun was still climbing in the east. List personally saddled Fiery Dragon to prevent it from making any noise. Mr. Carter, do you remember what I said? Master, you said to close the castle gate today. Dosen and the horses are to be locked up as much as possible so that they don't make any noise. If you encounter danger, take all the servants to hide in the cellar and don't go out. Only when Master returns can the castle return to normal. Very well, that's it. Carter's face was full of worry. Master, will you be in danger? A little, but I am fully prepared. Don't worry about me, Mr. Carter. On the side, Thomas hesitated. "Master, you should take me. Although I don't have much ability, but in times of danger, I can buy Master some time." "I am glad to hear that, Thomas, but there is no need." List raised his whip and patted the horse. Fiery Dragon sprang out like a flame. The wind whistled in his ears and the horse's hooves kicked up a cloud of dust. On the roads of the small town, there was not a single pedestrian. Clearly, they had received orders to stay at home. Filled with excitement, he ran all the way to the dairy farm. Wearing a mask, List climbed to the beacon tower and lit it himself. He originally intended to let the servants do the lighting, but in order to reduce the possibility of leakage, he decided to light it himself. List 2J. On the beacon, he lit. "On," he said, "there was a day. Way." Raising his hand to block the sunlight, List looked around and no longer hesitated. He opened the jar and poured the juice onto the 2 old cows. A pungent smell suddenly spread out. The 2 cows twisted their bodies like crazy, trying to escape, but the rope was tied tightly, so they could only bear with it. Even with a mask, List almost vomited because of the smell, but he still resisted the urge to vomit and quickly lit the smoke grass on the beacon tower, waiting for the flames to rise. He jumped down. He rode on the flaming dragon horse, which was also restless and wanted to escape, and went straight to the thorn forest. When he arrived at the thorn forest, he tied Flaming Dragon Horse and took a deep breath to suppress the urge to vomit. He looked around again to make sure that nothing was amiss. Then, he took out the jade box containing the thorn's worm. Man proposes, God disposes. Success or failure depends on this. Opening the box, he whispered to the chubby thorn's worm inside, "Little guy, come on, settle down." Their minds were connected. The thorn's worm climbed onto his hand, opened its mouth, and spat out the worm stalk. The worm stalk fell into the short bushes and quickly took root and germinated. At the same time, List had already quickly hid in the tunnel and ran towards the bunker with his waist bent. When he entered the bunker, the thorn's worm stalk had already grown. He forced himself to calm down, concentrate, and summon the smoke mission. The smoke twisted for a moment and formed serpentines. Mission completed. Reward: Invasion of the Invisible Dragon. Seeing that the mission was completed, he did not wait for the new mission to be issued and immediately wiped away the smoke. Circulating chi, List released magic eyes and looked at the sky. The thick smoke from the burning of the smoked grass rose into the air along with the breeze. In the bunker, he could smell the smell of stinky socks that had not been washed for half a year, which made him feel nauseous. Without binoculars, he could only rely on his own eyes. Under the beacon tower, the 2 old cows seemed to be suffocated by the smoke. They kept foaming at the mouth, which made List worried that they would be smothered to death before the invisible dragon appeared. Time ticked by. Seeing that the magic eye's time limit was almost up, yet there was still no trace of the invisible dragon. It stands to reason that the reward should appear at the same time after the mission is completed. It is just a matter of time before it reaches me. Why hasn't the invisible dragon invaded the flower town yet? Could it be that the reward is delayed? If the information about the invisible dragon is true, then it should have been attracted by the smoke grass as soon as it appeared. List's eyes were getting more and more tired. Just as he felt that he could not hold on any longer and was about to disperse the secret skill. All of a sudden, a faint shadow caught List's attention in the sunny sky next to the smoke column of the smoke grass. The phantom was small and faint at first. Then, it began to enlarge and eventually formed a faint gray-white dragon shape. It had a pair of huge wings and a streamlined body. It circled around the smoke column and descended. List's heart shook fiercely. The invisible dragon. It really is the invisible dragon. Clenching the red blood sword, List worked hard to operate the little remaining chi in his body and continue to support the magic eyes to observe the invisible dragon. This was the first time he had seen a dragon. A dragon that represented the world's apex power. Although he could only see the magic power on the dragon's body and not the dragon itself, he was still excited. As stated in the Girth Ranger Griff's Travels, the invisible dragon is not big. Compared to the thatched hut, it is only the size of a house. Including its wings, it is only 2 or 3 houses. However, its arrogant posture exuded an insufferably arrogant majesty. Even though he was quite far away, List could still feel his body tense up in response to the majesty of the dragon. This was dragon might. According to legend, wherever a dragon passed, all life forms would be awed and subdued. It followed the smoke of the smoke grass down. List's magic eyes had already collapsed and his body could no longer support the Chi's secret skill. The invisible dragon's figure disappeared without a trace. But there was no doubt that the information provided by the smoke task was correct. The invisible dragon liked the smell of the smoke grass. Rubbing his sore and swollen eyes, List looked in the direction of the beacon with his naked eyes. He could not see the invisible dragon, but the movements over there showed that the invisible dragon was tossing and turning. The smoke was scattered everywhere, and the old cow was crawling on the ground, whining. In a flash, even the beacon began to collapse, and flames raged. Wuxia. Chapter 54. Moo, old flower howled and fell into a pool of blood. Clenching the red blood sword, List once again operated his recently recovered chi and cast magic eyes through the bunker's window. His field of vision changed. Next to the flames, a gray invisible dragon made of magic power was tearing at an old cow. It had already eaten an entire old black and was now enjoying old flower. It would raise its head from time to time while eating, looking around vigilantly. Its shape was no different from the dragon illustrations List had seen in books. It had a standard Western dragon shape, just a bit more slender. It had 4 limbs, but when it landed on the ground, it did not fold its wings. The wings were somewhat similar to bat wings, with an arm-like structure in the middle. The fingers were scattered to support the expansion of the entire fleshy wing. When the fingers spread out, the wings spread out. When the fingers closed, the fingers contracted. But because the wings were an arm-like structure, it could not be closed like a bird. But it could be folded, which was similar to the bend of an elbow. In the middle of the wings, where the palm bone was, there was a finger that grew out, like a hook or a sickle. The invisible dragon used the hook on its wings to cut the cow's flesh, and then used its 2 small forelimbs to grab the minced meat and stuff it into its mouth. Its tail was very long, much longer than the dragon's tail in illustrations. It had horns on its head, not a pair or a single, but a whole row of long and short. It was said that dragon horns were a symbol of power, and the scepter used by kings for grand ceremonies was generally made of dragon horns. But in List's magic eyes, the part of the invisible dragon with the densest magic power was neither its horns nor its heart. Rather, it was its teeth, dragon teeth. The magic power of each dragon tooth was exceptionally clear. There were a total of 42 dragon teeth. In addition to the 4 huge fangs, the remaining teeth were also quite sharp. It is said that a dragon's soul is hidden in its teeth. By extracting a dragon's soul, using its teeth to forge a divine weapon, and then pouring its soul into it, one can forge the most powerful weapon. For a moment, List's heart palpitated with eagerness. He wanted to slaughter the invisible dragon and pull out all its teeth. Of course, it was just a thought. Hurry up and eat. Let's leave after eating. List dispersed the eye of magic and continued to observe the dairy farm. The invisible dragon's eating speed was not fast, allowing him to take his time to replenish his magic power and summon the smoke mission to check the new mission that he had not had the time to check before. Mission: the invisible dragon has appeared in the flower town. Prepare its favorite smoke grass and favorite beef. For the rest of the time, quietly wait for it to eat its fill before leaving. This is the only thing you can do. Please avoid the invasion of the invisible dragon. Reward: Gift of the Invisible Dragon. What should be done has already been done. This mission can be completed while lying down. His heart stirred, and his gaze fell on the invisible dragon's gift. What kind of gift will it be? His heart was already certain. In the following period of time, List quietly observed the invisible dragon. When his chi recovered, he would use magic eyes, and when his chi was exhausted, he would use his naked eye to observe. About half an hour later, the flames had already been extinguished, leaving only broken bones on the ground. When List saw the alfalfa on the ground being fanned by the wind, he immediately operated the little bit of chi he had just recovered. Enduring the soreness and swelling pain in his eyes, he once again released magic eyes. In his field of vision, the invisible dragon had already rushed into the sky, flying towards the east coast outside the flower town. It flew further and further away until List's magic eyes collapsed. It left. All sorts of feelings welled up in List's heart. There was the relaxation after the tension, the loss after the beautiful thing left, the anticipation of the gift, and the sense of accomplishment from completing the invasion of a dragon. Let's wait a bit longer in case the invisible dragon comes back. After staying in the bunker for nearly half an hour, he released magic eyes and carefully searched around, confirming that there was no trace of the invisible dragon. He pushed open the bunker's disguise and walked out. Facing the scorching sun, he stretched his body and said, "My first intimate contact with a dragon has ended just like that." He still did not know what kind of dragon the invisible dragon was. However, as long as it was a dragon, it was an incredible existence, especially a sacred dragon that could turn invisible. The word sacred more or less explained the extraordinariness of this dragon. After returning to the Thorns Woods, List took a simple look at the thorn sprite worm stalk, which was growing well. When he untied Fire-Idragon's reins, he suddenly discovered that Fire-Idragon's body was stained with feces and urine. The filly must have been scared witless by the invisible dragon's dragon might just now. Fortunately, Fire-Idragon's back was clean. Riding Fiery Dragon, List set off towards the dairy farm. However, Fiery Dragon was unwilling to approach the beacon, even if List whipped it. Dragon might. No, the smell of a dragon can scare you like this? You have the low-level World of Warcraft's Flamestrike bloodline. Helpless, List could only dismount and walk. He could not smell the smell left behind by the invisible dragon because his nose was filled with the smell of smoke grass that had yet to disperse. He did not know where the other 8 cows on the dairy farm had gone. List hoped that they had not run into the depths of the Thorns Ridge. If they did, they would definitely become World of Warcraft's meal. At the wreckage of the beacon, List carefully searched every inch of the ground. He even took a hoe and carefully turned over the ground. On one hand, he was looking for the invisible dragon's gift, and on the other hand, he was destroying the invisible dragon's footprints, destroying all traces related to the invisible dragon. An ordinary man is innocent, but treasuring a jade ring becomes a crime. List had to be careful. Found it. After a moment, List found what he was looking for under a cow bone, a transparent gem. It was not big, about the size of a fingernail. Compared to the rubies inlaid on the red blood sword, this gem was much smaller. It also did not have a gorgeous color. It was sparkling and translucent, had an irregular shape, was roughly flat and had many edges and corners, and could refract sunlight into fine flashes. Inexplicably, List thought of an advertising slogan. "A diamond is everlasting, one is everlasting." It was indeed a good material for making rings, but he did not know whether the space was real or fake. He did not immediately verify it, but rather carefully put it away and continued to rummage the ground, looking forward to finding a second one. Unfortunately, after rummaging through all the places with the invisible dragon's footprints within a radius of 50 meters, he was unable to find a second one. Unwilling to give up, he opened magic eyes to search again, but he still could not find it. It seems that the so-called gift is really just this one gem. List wiped the sweat from his forehead. His leather armor was already dirty, greatly reducing his aristocratic demeanor. However, his face was brimming with a bright smile. In any case, this chapter of the Invisible Dragon has come to an end. The flower town is safe. He went into a farmer's thatched cottage to cool off and take a look at the new mission. Mission completed. Reward, the Invisible Dragon's Gem. Chapter 55. The reason why John Shoulderpole's tomatoes are big and good is very simple. It is because his tomatoes are breeding a tomato sprite. List looked at the mission content and then looked at the reward and made this judgment. Tomatoes were the main vegetable here. Without sprite worms, the flower town's tomato output was not high. Now, there was finally going to be a tomato sprite worm, which was worthy of celebration. After going back, I will investigate the tomato sprite worm. I must not let any problems arise with the tomato sprite worm's breeding. List extended his left hand and held the invisible dragon gem in his palm. Light flickered. List took a deep look, then clenched his hand and put the gem away. Next, he left the peasant's house, mounted Fiery Dragon, and left the dairy farm. The matter was over. All traces of the invisible dragon had been erased. After a while, the butler Carter and the servants came out of the castle gate to welcome him. "Master, I am relieved that you have returned safely." After saying that, he heaved a long sigh of relief. "Don't worry, nothing will happen to me." List nodded. "Thomas, go to the town and inform Teacher Gort that the confinement is lifted and the flower town is restored to its original order. Mrs. Morrison, prepare the bath water. I am sweaty and need to take a good bath." "As you wish, master." The oppressive atmosphere was swept away, and the castle suddenly became busy. Thomas rode to the town to inform. Tom and the new serving man were busy feeding the horses and taking care of Dosen. The maid had to wash clothes, and the kitchen was busy preparing lunch. Just the aristocrat List alone had 15 servants working non-stop to ensure that List could enjoy everything. List's principle was to shower frequently, but not for more than 5 minutes at a time. He changed into his home clothes, went to the study, and locked the door. He took out the invisible dragon gem and began to study it. From its appearance alone, there was no way to judge the mystery of the gem. When List opened his magic eyes, he could only see countless stars wandering in the magic vortex of the gem. Apart from the difference in color, the invisible dragon gem in his magic eyes was not much different from the ruby on the red blood sword. So, how is it related to the space ring? Or should I say, how do I open the space inside the gem? Bind it with blood or inject magic power? List was a bit afraid of the fact that dripping blood required self-mutilation. Therefore, he first tried to pour his chi into the gem. When his chi came into contact with the gem, he immediately felt a subtle connection similar to a sprite worm's contract being quickly established. Then, the gem began to fiercely absorb his chi. After absorbing about 1/10 of the dough chi in his body, the gem stopped absorbing. The subtle connection had expanded into an invisible door. Following the perception of the chi connection, List suddenly discovered that he had explored a space that was neither too big nor too small. The space appeared to be an irregular circle. It was impossible to distinguish up, down, left, south, east, west, and north. There were walls in the surroundings. They were unknown structures that resembled walls. There were no gaps and they were solid and indestructible. It's shaped like a ball with a diameter of about 5 meters, which is about the size of a single apartment. List's eyes were clearly fixed on the shining gem in his hand. But at the same time, he could feel this space in his mind. It was a wonderful feeling. He also discovered that this state could be sustained as long as he had chi to replenish the magic power needed to open the portal. The consumption of magic power was not great. It was basically the same as his body's natural recovery of chi. List tried to cut off the supply of chi. Soon, the portal leading to the space dissipated, the wonderful feeling in his mind disappeared, and the spherical space disappeared without a trace, relying on chi or magic power to open the space, consuming magic power to maintain the opening of the space, cutting off the magic power, and immediately closing the space. The invisible dragon's gem is indeed a space ring. Its size was suitable for making a ring. More importantly, it needed a continuous supply of magic power, and the hand was the best place to supply chi. However, I do not intend to embed it in a ring. It would be too conspicuous. For the time being, I will not be able to use it. For safety's sake, I should make it into a pendant and hang it in front of my chest. Space rings were priceless treasures, especially for greater aristocrats, who used them to hide secrets. But for Liszt, he currently had nothing worth storing in a space ring. It was not an urgent need for him. To be honest, if he could be given a greater sprite, he would not hesitate to exchange the space ring. No matter how good a space ring was, it was not as important as improving productivity. In any case, the research had to continue. He opened the space ring again and began to try to store things in it. This was not difficult for him. After a simple exploration, he understood the method of storing things, magic power wrapping. His left hand held the space ring, and his right hand released chi to wrap the item he wanted to store, a book. In an instant, the book disappeared from the table and appeared in the space ring. It was as if he could make the books appear anywhere in the space with just a thought. Thus, he happily stored all the books in the study into his space ring and piled them up in the air, as if there was a bookshelf there. The books were kept motionless in the space, not the slightest bit messy. Is this a vacuum-like environment? He lit a candle and then put it in, and then he saw an incredible scene. The candle remained burning, motionless. Liszt dispersed the chi maintaining the portal to move the candle and put the flame on a book. The flame was pushed to the side by the cover, but it was not extinguished, nor did it ignite the cover of the book. It was as if everything that entered the space would completely fall into a motionless environment. Even the motion between atoms has stopped. Liszt tried to explain it with science, but he soon gave up. This world seemed to have a scientific foundation, but things related to magic power were beyond the scope of science. There was no science to talk about in the space ring. Liszt wrapped his chi, and with a thought, the candle was taken out again. The flame continued to burn. After repeated experiments, Liszt could already be sure that the inside of the space ring was relatively motionless. I wonder what will happen if I put a living thing in. He wanted to do so, but his chi was already exhausted. Opening the space required magic power, storing things required magic power, and taking things out also required magic power. With his Earth Knight's chi storage, it was still a little difficult. During lunch, Gort, Marcus, and the others all came over. Teacher Gort, has the town's order been restored? Liszt sat at the head of the table and used a knife to cut a piece of barbecued meat. He had already adapted to the Western style of dining. Gort took a sip of beer. It's just a morning of confinement, it has no effect on the town. But Liszt, the dairy farm is missing 2 cows. In other words, the 8 cows are back. Yes, they actually ran out of the Thorns Ridge. This is too crazy. Instead, only the corpses of the 2 old cows remain. Gort obviously wanted to inquire about the matter, but he didn't dare to ask, because Liszt had said before not to ask or think about what happened on the dairy farm. Liszt still had no intention of explaining. Well, let the farmers take the bones of the old cows back to make soup. Fill in the underground tunnel over there, and the dairy farm will be restored to its original appearance. Chapter 56. After lunch, Liszt said to Gort, there is a peasant family in the tomato settlement called John Shoulderpole. The tomatoes in his field are big and good. Come with me to see if there are any interesting factors. Gort was baffled. Liszt, how do you know? Pay attention and listen to what others say. Teacher Gort, a qualified lord cannot be ignorant and ill-informed about the territory. He must pay attention to all aspects. All right. Gort still couldn't figure out why List knew about the matters in the fief while he didn't. Perhaps List had arranged inspectors in the fief? He thought of the mysterious actions in the morning as well as the tunnel excavation. He felt that he had to work seriously. His every move would certainly fall into List's eyes. This was not a good sign, as it meant that he could lose the Lord's trust at any time. "Sir Lord, this is John Shoulderpole." The clerk pointed to a slow serf and said. John Shoulderpole hurriedly took his wife and children and knelt before List. "Sir Lord." At the same time, he was nervous, not knowing why the Lord was looking for him. If it was the former tax knight looking for him, he would probably have pissed his pants. Being looked for by an aristocrat was definitely not a good thing. However, List had a good reputation after coming to the flower town, so John was just nervous. Sure enough. The flower town's lord smiled gently at him. "Don't be nervous, John. I heard that your family grows the best tomatoes, is that right?" "Sir Overlord, yes." "Do you know why it is the best?" "I don't know, Sir Lord. However, this season, my family's tomatoes are getting better and better. The fief's freedmen like to buy tomatoes from my family. Even Sir Lord's castle's Mrs. Abbey praised my family's tomatoes as the best," said John proudly. There was no praise more pleasing to the serfs than receiving the castle's affirmation. List avoided the following questions and said directly, "In that case, take me to your family's tomato field." Following John Shoulderpole, the group quickly arrived at the tomato settlement's large tomato fields. Tomatoes were not planted in large areas like wheat, but rather, they were divided into small fields. The tomato field assigned to John's family was located in the center of the tomato settlement. It was obvious that the growth was better than the other families' fields. Of course, no matter who planted the field, it was still List's field. "Sir Lord, this is my family's tomato." John beamed with joy when he mentioned his tomato field. "The town officials taught us how to farm. Every day, I dig pond mud and collect manure to fertilize them. They're growing better and better." The eggplant sprouts in the field were very sturdy and did not look like they were breeding sprite worms. However, the List of today had his own ways of distinguishing between them. He quickly cast magic eyes and stared at the tomato field. Soon, he found that one of the tomato seedlings had a faint turquoise magic power flowing around it. It was undoubtedly a worm stalk. "I think I've figured it out." List dispersed his magic eyes and turned to Gort, saying, "This is a sign of a sprite worm's gestation. Teacher Gort, you have work to do. Protect John's tomato seedlings, especially this one, it will be a worm stalk." "Oh, heavens, is this true? Is the town going to give birth to another sprite worm?" Gort exclaimed exaggeratedly, "Sir Baron, the glory of the night loves you. The flower town is rising. Please rest assured, I will definitely protect this cute little fellow and let it gestation in peace." Marcus, who followed him, exclaimed in surprise, "To breed 2 sprite worms in such a short time, sir, you are indeed the glory of the night loves you." He felt that it was worth it to pledge loyalty to his follower. All the signs showed that List was by no means an ordinary lesser aristocrat. His temperament, his way of thinking, as well as his luck, all made clear. In particular, luck, sometimes, luck was more important than strength. List smiled slightly. With the smoke mission, there was no need to worry about the lack of surprises. List remained calm and announced in a gentle tone, "The tomato sprite worm is about to be born. Its existence will bring a better future to the tomato settlement. In order to reward John Shoulderpole for his careful care, I have decided to give him a Nalda." What a lucky serf. Gort was not without jealousy. With his salary of 10 copper coins a day, it would take him more than 3 months to save 1 gold coin, if he did not buy alcohol or eat meat. Sprite worm, 1 Nalda. Sir Lord rewarded me with 1 nalda. Even after List left with his people, John was still in a daze, as if he was dreaming. I planted tomatoes, and after planting them, I got a gold coin. It should be known that serfs could not save a silver coin after planting crops for a year. They might not even see a nalda in their entire lives, yet I got one. Dad, show me a nalda. Wow, I have never seen a nalda before. His 8-year-old son shouted, trying to snatch the gold coin from his hand. John came to his senses. He grabbed the gold coin and glared at his son. Step aside. Do you think you can touch a nalda? He looked at his wife and stretched out his trembling hand. Annie, look, a nalda was given to me by the Lord. We are rich. We have a nalda. Annie was also trembling, saying excitedly, Oh heavens, John, is this true? Am I not dreaming? You are not dreaming, I am not dreaming either. This is true. Sir Lord personally gave it to me. Annie, we are rich. Oh ha, our family is rich. His 4-year-old daughter clapped her hands and cheered. Dad, show me a nalda. His son was still asking for money. John didn't pay attention to his son. He only cared about looking forward to the future with his wife. Thank the heavens, thank the night's glory for looking after Sir Lord. With Sir Lord, our flower town will get richer and richer. Annie took the nalda and carefully played with it in the palm of her hand. A gentle expression rippled on her unsightly square face. John, we can use the nalda to exchange for freedman status. Exchange for freedman status? John shook his head. I don't want to exchange. Why? Haven't you always wanted to become a freedman, leave the flower town, and live in another town? That's because in the flower town, we will never have enough to eat. But Annie, now? We have seafood, very cheap seafood. 1 copper coin can buy a lot of clams. Look at Carl and Lucy, they have put on weight. It is Sir Lord's grace that we can eat our fill in the flower town. This nalda is also Sir Lord's grace. He said in a scorching tone of a fanatic, I believe that Sir Lord will make the flower town better and better. I want to farm for Sir Lord for the rest of my life. Annie, will you support me? You are the head of the family, John, so you can make the decision. Besides, I am used to life in the flower town. Annie responded with a smile, I will go prepare dinner. How about we eat white bread tonight? Of course. I miss the soft, fragrant, and sweet white bread on our wedding anniversary. The youngest daughter clapped her hands and laughed. Oh, let's eat white bread tonight. Chapter 57. Mission completed. Reward, a tomato sprite worm. Mission, the thief has no night guards and is always on the brink of danger. The 4 retainer knights are crippled, but more seedlings are waiting to be unearthed. Seafood brings nutrition. Please select suitable youngsters for night training. Reward, a World of Warcraft egg that is about to hatch. The smoke serpentines slowly dissipated. List came back to his senses. The tomato settlement mission was very easy to complete. In fact, none of the smoke missions had any difficulty. They just followed the flow of events. A World of Warcraft egg that is about to hatch. In other words, I have to get a flying World of Warcraft. List looked at Dosen, who was crawling at his feet and sticking out its tongue like a dog to dissipate heat. He suddenly thought of a wonderful scene. Leading the yellow on the left, raising the azure on the right. This old man is crazy with youth. He doesn't have a big yellow dog or an eagle, but he has the even more powerful World of Warcraft. The flying dust dog Dosen had already trained it to a conditioned reflex. As long as List gave the command, it would pounce, bite, sit, lie down, jump, and climb. Compared to training dogs, Dosen was easier to train because it was smarter. Just that, Dosun's flying dust dog had yet to successfully release the spell Rockthorns. I can train dogs, but I can't train eagles. I don't know whether this World of Warcraft bird that is about to become my pet is smart or not, and whether it is easy to train. If it cannot be tamed, then I can only roast it and eat it. While sighing, List unconsciously stuck out his tongue and licked his lips. There were very few chickens raised in the Flower Town, and they mainly laid eggs. Even for him, it was not easy to eat a chicken, let alone the even rarer ducks and geese. Currently, his mouth was really out of the blue. The Thorns Ridge was full of wild animals. Marcus had good archery, so it was very easy for him to shoot down a few birds. However, he had a proud temperament and yearned to be an aristocrat, so he would not easily become a hunter. Aristocrats' hunting was called wild fun, while hunting was called lowering his status. For List, this was a strange concept, but for people like Marcus, this was the pursuit of life. Therefore, List did not have the nerve to command Marcus to casually hunt a few birds to satisfy his craving. Originally, I didn't intend to form a night squad so soon. There are too few subjects now, and there aren't many good seedlings to choose from. But since the mission has been issued, let's form a team. There should be a few hundred youths between the ages of 10 and 16 in this town. Let's pick 12 of them and form a team. The night squad consisted of 12 members, 1 captain, 1 vice-captain, and 10 members. Great nobles would set up their own night academies and select children from a young age to enter the night academies to train. Batches of them would be eliminated, and finally, those who were qualified would become the retainer knight of the Lord and join the orders of chivalry. Marcus was such a knight. His father had sent him to the Knight Academy at a very young age. Many sons of Baron and Lord Knight would also train in the Knight Academy, including List, who had gone to the Knight Academy. The Flower Town didn't have this foundation. Therefore, he could only pick a few healthy youths and form a nondescript night squad to nurture. The cleverest housewife cannot cook without rice. List was also helpless. For the time being, he would first fool around and complete the smoke mission. "Sir, you want to select new retainer knight and form a night squad?" After learning of List's intentions at the banquet, Thomas immediately became excited. The Flower Town's food is abundant, so there is no need to be conservative. The patrols cannot be counted on. They are just a group of ordinary people. Carl's group of 4 has yet to cultivate chi. Therefore, I need new forces to guard the Flower Town's safety. There is only half a year left until winter. Saying this, List blinked his eyes. In fact, sooner or later, I will lay my hands on the Thorns Ridge. They are a hindrance to the Flower Town's development. Teacher Marcus, you need to preside over the selection and training of the night squad. The Count didn't draw boundaries for the fief, so he could naturally choose to annex the Thorns Ridge. Thomas immediately performed the night etiquette and said solemnly, "Sir, please rest assured. Marcus will select qualified night squad members and train them well. I will have Teacher Gort fully cooperate with you and train them well, Teacher Marcus." "As you wish, sir." When leaving the castle, Marcus held his head high and stuck out his chest. He didn't hold back the graceful bearing of an elite Earth Knight. Ever since he came to the Flower Town, he had been depressed. Apart from protecting List, he could only train Carl and the other 3 retainer Knight Squad members every day. After witnessing List's wisdom and luck and understanding of List's boldness and ambition, he decided to serve and lay dormant, waiting to establish his career. After witnessing List's wealth of the sea, he became even more convinced. However, from beginning to end, he was a bit embarrassed. He didn't know what role he could play in the fief. List wouldn't go to the battlefield for at least a few years. Without a night squad, how could he go to the battlefield? He had the intention to clear the Thorns Ridge, but he, an Earth Knight, couldn't accomplish it. He felt somewhat regretful that there was no way to serve his country. Now, the opportunity had finally arrived. List chose to form a night squad and took the first step to establish his career. He wished he could immediately select the most suitable retainer night squad, train them, and immediately clear the Thorns Ridge. When the Grand Duchy started a new war, he could join the war at any time. That evening, he asked Gort for the Flower Town census list. All the youngsters between 10 and 16 years of age were selected. The next day, 4 retainer night squads were dispatched to bring these youngsters from their respective homes. The sun was scorching the earth. A total of 233 youngsters of varying heights stood solemnly with their chests stuck out. Their eyes were filled with longing, nervousness, worry, fear, longing, and other complex expressions. They had been informed that the Sir Lord was going to select a retainer night squad. They all understood the meaning of a retainer night squad member. Even if they didn't understand, their parents and neighbors would tell them the meaning. Retainer night squad members were divided into 2 categories. One category consisted of retainer night squad members like Karl Hammerstein and Rome Winesong. They were serfs who sold themselves to aristocrats. Their main task was to follow aristocrats on trips. On the battlefield, they were responsible for carrying equipment, doing laundry, cooking, and so on. The other category consisted of retainer night squad members like Marcus. Most of them were freedmen and their main task was to fight. Many sons of lesser aristocrats would go to other aristocrats' territories to serve as retainer night squad members and learn the combat skills and aristocratic etiquette of a knight. After finishing their studies, they would either return home to inherit the title of nobility or go to the battlefield to establish their career. Basically, retainer night squad members were aristocrats' reservists. Even if they were serfs, after being selected as retainer night squad members, their status as freedmen would be returned. If they made further contributions, they could still be conferred the title of nobility. Even if they didn't make much contributions, they would not have to worry about food and drink while following an aristocrat. They could still save money to subsidize their family. Therefore, the youngsters all stood ramrod straight, trying their best to perform a little better. They hoped to be selected as retainer night squad members. They all understood that this was an opportunity to change their fate. It might only happen once in a lifetime. Marcus was riding on a yellow-gray horse. He looked at the youngsters one by one. He could vaguely see his own shadow. Many years ago, didn't he also experience such a selection and was selected by Sir Count's night squad leader? Of course, at that time, he had already studied at the Knight Academy for 2 years. Chapter 58. List did not disturb Marcus's selection. He had the mind to do a recruit drill of walking in a straight line. However, the existence of magic and chi allowed the individual's strength to be infinitely magnified, which was no longer something that discipline could make up for. An elite Earth Knight like Marcus was more than enough to fight 100 ordinary retainer knight. Even a new Earth Knight like List himself could fight 20 or 30 ordinary retainer knight. As long as he had enough chi, ordinary retainer knight simply could not get close to him and could only exhaust his chi first. As an instructor in the Knight Academy, Marcus had his own way of training a novice knight. Therefore, the weather was too hot, so List just stayed in the castle and trained Dosen. "Sit down, Dosen." Dosen, who was already like a big wolf dog, heard the order and immediately sat on the ground, looking at List with his tongue out. List threw a small piece of jerky and rubbed Dosen's head. Magic eye was cast. It could be seen that Dosen's body was full of magic power. In theory, Dosen's magic power is not low. Being served well in the castle, it has developed rapidly and has reached the point where it can release magic. Unfortunately, without the guidance of an adult flying dust dog, it probably does not know how to control the magic power in its body. Should I help it guide it? With the observation of Magic Eye, he was confident that he could guide Dosen's magic power to vent. However, it was hard to say whether or not there would be any danger and Trembling Woods would be accidentally killed. After hesitating for only a moment, he quickly made a decision. If I don't guide it, once the magic power accumulates too much, Dosun will not be able to vent it and will suffocate to death. Rather than that, it is better to let it learn magic earlier. Even if it dies, it will not waste much food. The most important thing is that the feelings are not deep. Before crossing over, List raised a dog. After it died of old age and illness, he was sad for a long time. Nowadays, it was not easy to develop feelings for pets. Half of a person's pain came from emotional sacrifice. The soul and mind of an adult already knew how to cut losses in time. Come here, Dosun. Waving his hand, Dosun immediately came over while wagging his tail. Woo woo, woof woof. To be honest, the flying dust dog was a large dog, and its behavior and personality were similar to that of a dog. Perhaps this was also the reason why it was called the flying dust dog. It was a dog that was even more irascible than normal dogs. I will teach you magic next. List appeased the flying dust dog, calmed it down, and used magic eyes to observe the flow of magic in its body. Magic and battle aura were all magical powers. The difference was that magic was extracted from the outside world by mages, while combat energy was extracted from the knight's own body. That was why a magician could control many types of magic, such as a fireball or a water arrow. A knight could only control his own combat aura. And the magic of World of Warcraft. Half of it was refined by itself, while the other half was absorbed from the outside world. Its recovery speed was far faster than that of a human magician or a knight. As for the release of magic, a magician only needed to guide the elements in the air to arrange and combine them into various spells. A knight, on the other hand, needed to attach his combat energy to his weapon to prevent it from escaping into the air. World of Warcraft certainly cannot learn the complex casting methods and profound magic knowledge of magicians. Therefore, the release of magic is more like an instinctive reaction of the body. I guide its magic to vent, and then it will naturally release rock thorns. It should be like this. Just like how a knight released his combat energy. A knight generally released his combat energy through his hands. List thought, which part of his body should Dosun use to release magic? Claws? Claws shouldn't work, so he should use them to walk. He had never heard of a knight releasing his combat energy with his feet. Suddenly, he remembered the Windblade wolf he encountered when he first came to the Flower Town and patrolled the Thorns Ridge. The Windblade wolf released magic from its mouth, Windblade. Judging from the structure of the animal's body, the most suitable place for them to release magic should be the mouth. Therefore, I have to channel Dosun's magic energy into its mouth and then break through the shackles. This shouldn't be difficult. In my memory, my predecessor was quite stupid, but when he released his combat energy for the first time, he didn't encounter any difficulty. With this in mind, his hands had already started. He pressed down on Dosun, surged his combat energy, and guided the magic energy in Dosun's body. Woo woo. Dosun, as if it was burning, struggled frantically. However, it was still only a few months old puppy and couldn't break free from the Earth Knight's shackles. It could only be baptized by List's combat energy. The fire-attributed combat energy had a scorching and explosive nature, which was equivalent to giving it a sauna with a temperature of several hundred degrees Celsius. The dog's eyes instantly turned red. Its body temperature was also rising rapidly, to the point where it was emitting steam. I almost forgot that my fighting aura is of the fire attribute. It doesn't seem suitable to be used as a guide. But since I've already done it, success or failure depends on this. He suddenly exerted force and called out, "Trembling Woods, release your magic." Bang! The magic I saw the magic energy in Dosun's body. Under the guidance and push of his combat energy, it gathered in Dosun's mouth. Then, with an explosive sound, the magic energy instantly reopened a certain position in Dosun's mouth, as if puncturing a balloon filled with water. Next was the moment when a miracle was witnessed. On the lawn next to him, 3 huge bamboo-shaped rock thorns emerged. Each one was as thick as an adult's thigh, with a sharp tip like a needle, and the whole length was at least 1 meter. Beautiful. List laughed. Well done, Dosun, you learned magic. He looked at the rock thorns and was very proud. This magic was absolutely powerful for sneak attacks and sneak attacks. Thinking about it, as long as he shouted, Dosun, release magic energy, the rock thorns would invade his anus in an instant. The scene was beautiful. Suddenly, the voice of the valet Thomas came from behind. Master, Dosun seems to be injured. Huh? List noticed that Dosun had slumped to the ground, with a lot of blood flowing from his mouth. The dog's mouth had been smashed, as if it had exploded. Fortunately, after examination, Dosun was only affected by the outpouring of magic energy. He suffered some superficial injuries, and his bones and tendons were not injured. His slump was more because of the excessive release of magic energy, resulting in the emptiness of his body. After figuring out the situation, List was relieved. He said to Thomas, "This is the danger of magic. Why are there so few mysterious mages and why are they not liked by everyone? Because their magic experiments are always full of danger, and explosions can happen at any time. They don't understand the meaning of science, but they try to control the rules." These words were more like talking to himself. Thomas didn't understand. He asked curiously, "Master, have you ever seen a mage?" "No." "Then you are so great. You have never seen a mage, but you taught Dosun magic. Praise Master." Thomas was like a fanatic, his tone amazed. List smiled slightly. Such a small thing was not worth mentioning. He took out a handkerchief and wiped his hands. "Thomas, take care of Dosun and bandage his wounds. Food should be mashed before feeding." You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.